that we would carry on if no one suggested that today's hearing would be discharged. But obviously, from going back over my communications, I see that perhaps wasn't exactly what I said. So I apologise to anyone for the inconvenience for the late confirmation of the hearing date. I hope no one was terribly inconvenienced by that. Today, I've set out most of the questions that I want answered, or the broad questions I want answered in the agenda. I don't see us going beyond lunchtime, but I hope not. Everyone's shaking their head. That's good. If we do go beyond 11 o'clock, I'll probably have a short break, comfort break around sometime after 11. There are a couple of housekeeping things. So we did get one response to my request for submissions on the revised draft NPF4 to the interested parties, and that was from Lorna Parkins. I hope the appellant's seen that and will be responding to it. Have you seen that?
We're aware of that, so we will.
Yeah, it hasn't been sent. We haven't sent it to you. Oh dear.
It's okay. We would just be moving on a week basis as such. So anyway, if you know what I mean.
Okay. So. Good. All right. That's fine. Good. And the other thing is, in the ministerial statement on NPF4, which came out a few days ago, NPF4 is to be adopted on the 13th of February, and there was also reference to ministerial guidance, which would be issued at the same time. I'm a little bit flummoxed by this, but what I was proposing to do was just carry on, and if I can get a decision or a notice finished by before then, I would simply issue it. But it may be, for instance, if I was to issue a notice of intention, that we'll simply have to take further evidence on the ministerial guidance at the time it arises. That's I think I see everyone nodding their head on that too. Okay, yeah,
good. I think, sir, on the transitional guidance, the suggestion was that it would be issued at some point between now and the adoption of NPF4. So right. when that will be, I don't think anybody knows yet, but it may come fairly soon.
Right. Okay. Oh well, sorry. I hadn't picked that up. That's very helpful. Well, we'll just have to deal with it as and when it arises. Yeah. I'm assuming that written submissions will be okay for that, but I just have to see what it says, and parties can perhaps suggest to me the procedure if they don't think written submissions are appropriate at that time. Yeah. Good. Okay. So should we just press on with the agenda? So my first question, I'm not sure if I absolutely need to determine the capacity of Parkhead Primary School to reach conclusion, but I thought I'd better ask the questions on it. And obviously so actually, what I haven't done is just check I know who everyone is. So I recognise Mr. Watson and Mr. MacLeod. You're leading today, are you? The two of you, but Mr. Watson, you're leading for the council, are you?
It will be Mr. Cotton,
Mr. Cotton, right, okay.
who's doing the most of the agenda. I'm doing two questions towards the end, which are 4C and 4D. The rest of the agenda will be covered by Mr. Cotton.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Cotton. Sorry, I recognise you now. You're slightly off camera, so
yeah.
And of course,
we have a triple act at our side, sir. So there's myself, there's Mr. Salter, who you know, and then to my immediate left is Alistair Blarowski, who is a consultant with GEDIS as well, and who's been involved in the education assessment work. A lot of the answers will be given by Mr. Bladowski, but I'll chip in from time to time as well.
So, but Bledowski, B-L-E-D-O-V or O-W-S-T-I.
I'll let him spell it for you.
Yeah, it's BLEDUWSKI.
Yeah. Okay, the Polish one.
Yes.
Polish name. Right. Okay, good. Right. Grand. Okay, so we'll press on with the first question. So it was really about this question, focusing in on this question of what exactly the GP rooms in the primary school ought to be, or which rooms ought to be counted as the GP rooms. So I have two plans for the primary school, one provided by the council and one provided by which is MH216. Yeah. Sorry, no, one provided by the appellant, which is one MH216, and also one provided by the council. I don't think there's, as a kind of correction to MH216. So if everyone's got the corrected version, do you have that, Mr. Bledowski? Yeah, that's grand. Okay, I think the only, I mean, it's not really. I think the only difference is that the room that was marked as a GP room in just to the, let's say it's the north of the nursery, that's been turned into part of the nursery. I don't know if there's anything else that's relevant to the counting of GP rooms there. I count 15 rooms there marked as classrooms and one room marked P3A, I think, which I presume is also a classroom, or would be marked as a classroom on. Because it's marked in the classroom as on 216. Is that perhaps that's the place to start? Is that a correct assessment, Mr. Cotton?
Yes, I think we're agreed on that as to how many rooms there are. That was in the statement of agreed matters. We agreed on how many rooms there are currently in the school. Good.
Okay. So the question is, if this is a 16 classroom school, then the is that the stage. Sorry.
Our position is in a 16 class organisation, we would have 4 general purpose spaces. So it would be 16 classrooms plus 4 general purpose spaces would be the council standard, which is above the legal minimum standard.
I hadn't understood that. I thought it was 3. So that's so the general standard is 3, but the council would normally have 4.
Yes, that's the council's standard. So it's, as I understand it, 2014 determining primary capacity says the number and use of GP rooms is to be determined by the council. So it sets a minimum number of general purpose rooms, so it doesn't set a maximum number.
Right, it doesn't set a maximum, right? So but the council separately sets a minimum of 4.
Yes,
separately from
the council's standard accommodation brief for primary school would be for a 2-stream school to have 16 classrooms and 4 general purpose spaces,
right,
which can be made up of classrooms or other spaces.
Right. Okay. Well, perhaps that's the place to start, Mr. Bledowski. Is that appropriate in terms of the guidance the council can set for general purpose rooms as a minimum for a 16 classroom school in terms of the guidance?
Yeah, I think Mr. Coleman's interpretation is correct as much as PPA-9 of defining primary school capacity. The Scottish Government document sets out minimum. A 16 classroom school would be expected to have a minimum of 3. And so, yes, my understanding is that it doesn't provide a maximum. I think what the appellant is trying to convey is that although the school is currently configured to be a 14 classroom school, is that it could be capable of being, whether on a permanent or an interim basis, reconfigured up to a 16 classroom school and would meet the minimum requirements.
Of the Scottish Government.
Yes, so in determining primary school capacity.
Yeah, but not of the council.
Yes, that's
I was going to ask, sir, just on that point, is there a council policy document that sets that out?
Yes, we've got an accommodation brief for primary schools that was approved a number of years ago. It would be before I came in post, so it would be 7 or 8 years ago. I'd have to check the exact time when it went. But yeah, there is a document that exists setting that out.
It would have been helpful to see that before now. Is that something that you can provide?
Yeah, we can provide that. Yeah.
Is there any objection to that being provided, Mr. McLeod?
If it's a document in the public domain, I don't think we can object to it. We would want the opportunity to consider it though, and possibly say something about it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Is that possible then? That would be good.
Yeah.
Okay, grand. Okay. So I think I get the position of the parties on that. We'll see what the council's document says. But I would just before we move on from that, can you give a reason why 4 general purpose rooms rather than the 3 set out in the Scottish Government's guidance are required as minimum by West Lothian Council?
I think, to be honest, it's similar to what the appellant said, in terms of the appellant's position that the school currently could be used for teaching more than a 14-class organisation. To be honest, we would agree, but in terms of a working capacity, it can be. And indeed, this session, we're teaching a 15-class organisation in the school. So it's not that we're saying it's impossible to teach more than 14 classes in the school. It's just saying our standard sets a minimum number of GP rooms higher, which gives us more flexibility for coping with bulge year groups or sort of slightly changed elements. It's just our planning capacity might be a lower definition, but then the working capacity that we can run in the school is higher. So it gives us more flexibility, but because inevitably you don't get the same number of children in every year group. You get bulges, you get, a year where you need 3 classes in one year group. So it's the difference between planning and working capacity. So we set a higher standard for planning capacity, but which gives us a more flexible working capacity.
So, but doesn't that help the appellant's case in this particular case? Simply because if the working capacity is capable of being greater than the planning capacity, and this is there's a potential interim capacity problem at Parkhead, then
if the appellant was showing that it was going to fall again afterwards, then in theory it could do. But my understanding is that without the Gaviside solution, the forecasts show that numbers continuing to rise. But
yes, if Gaviside goes ahead without Parkhead Primary School, without the new Gaviside Primary School.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Would you like to say something about that?
The other area is for which general purpose areas we would use. And the reason we don't define the gym or hall as general purpose spaces is because that again reduces flexibility. But it's impossible to teach a class in a gym permanently. Whereas if you have general purpose spaces that consist of enclosed classrooms, it gives you more flexibility to increase the working capacity of a school. Whereas if you have a school that's composed entirely of general purpose spaces that aren't classrooms, it makes it impossible to expand the number of classes you're teaching in a school. So if you just had one general purpose space that's breakout space, one that's for stage, one that's for gym, and one that's for hall, you'd have 4 general purpose spaces, but you could never use any of those for teaching an additional class. So that's why we don't define gyms or halls as general purpose spaces, because that reduces your flexibility to increase the working capacity. And my understanding is determining primary capacity says it is for the council to determine which spaces should be used as general purpose spaces. So I think that's fairly simple.
Yes, but I think there's a question of the explanation and what that explanation means in terms of the working capacity of the school is also a matter of interest, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, that's actually a very helpful explanation. That was actually the next question I was going to ask. So, Sladowski, do you want to respond to both those two matters dealt with by Mr. Cotton, both the explanation as to why the GP spaces, the council doesn't want to treat the gym and the hall as GP spaces, and why it requires 4 rather than 3 GP spaces?
So our assessment is based on the determining primary school capacity against a non-exhaustive list of GP spaces on page 9, includes gym halls. I think ultimately, I understand where Mr. Cotton's coming from with regards to having the flexibility. I think it really depends on what the GP space would be used for. That would define whether or not the gym hall would be appropriate. So I think that would be a matter really that the schools would be defining. But to our mind, I see no reason why the GP space couldn't include a gym hall on the basis that there might be certain uses that could be used in there for general purpose. With regards to
sorry, just before, what is a general purpose room used for exactly? How does it work? What's the idea of it in terms of the guidance?
So typically, general purpose space is used for teaching classes in specialist subjects or breakout areas. So you would have potentially STEM activities, so science, technology, engineering, and maths. You would have library purposes. You can have drama, which is why stages are often included, things like that. The requirement for PE is separate and on top of that general purpose requirement, which is why we wouldn't include the PE hall in a school of this size as general purpose space, because you've got to deliver that PE curriculum separate on top of that, and there's a separate listing of the minimum PE space that's required in the Sport Scotland guidance.
Which also isn't before me.
Which
also isn't before me.
No, I don't believe in necessarily as submitted the Sport Scotland guidance.
No, but I mean, you're making an argument based on something that you haven't given me.
It might be helpful if you had. I'm making the argument based on the fact that determining primary school capacity says it is for the council to determine which GP spaces to use. So I don't believe that I need to do any more argument than that. But determining primary school capacity says on our educational judgment, we decide what the GP spaces are. So we've decided that with regard to other guidance.
Yes. Also, it's a local authority decision based on the requirements of the school, how many GP areas the school should have. And factors how many. Yes. But I think councils obviously have to take reasonable decisions and make reasonable assessments of things. And I have to be able to understand the reasons for them. So I don't think it can be the end of your argument to say this is what we've decided, and that's enough for you, Mr. Reporter. Can it?
Reading of it, it says GP provision in schools will vary within the cross local authority areas depending on the nature of the school and how it's designed. The local authority should take these factors into account.
Just tell me where you are.
So this is on the page planning capacity 1.2 calculating planning capacity.
So hold on. That is page. Sorry, which are we in? We're in determining planning capacity document 40 page. I was looking at page 10. Ultimately, local authority decision based on school requirements of school, how many GP areas a school should have. Sorry, what were you?
Yes, that's the exact section. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So what bit were you pointing me to?
So that's my understanding, is that it's the local authority decision how many GP areas a school should have. So that's what I've relied on there. But I've determined how many GP areas a school should have based on our standards, which is 4 for a 16 class school, and that we don't include halls or PE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
That's a policy we've had for a number of years, and that is consistent across all our primary school estate.
Mm-hmm. And which you'll provide me with. Yeah.
I'm not sure, sir, that's quite how that paragraph should be read, because if you look at it, GP provision in schools will vary within.
Oh, hold on. Where are you reading from?
Same paragraph, page.
Oh, right. So we're up on the previous page. Yes, GP provision in schools will vary. Yeah.
Yes. GP provision in schools will vary within and across local authority areas depending on the nature of the school and how it is designed. Local authorities should take these factors into account when determining GP areas in each school. Now, that paragraph, to my mind, suggests school by school assessment is appropriate, depending on the nature of the accommodation that's available, and not a council-wide standard.
We do undertake an individual assessment of GP areas in each school, and it does vary within each school. So in some schools it will be entirely enclosed GP space, in some schools it will include stages, some schools it will include breakout areas. So that assessment is undertaken on a school by school basis, but consistently we don't use the PE space as part of that GP assessment, because we don't feel that gives us sufficient flexibility given the statutory requirement for delivering PE lessons in schools. But you would not GP elements, understanding.
It's fine for that to be the council's approach, but in terms of what this document is for, it does say examples of GP areas, and in the list is gyms and sports halls. I mean, that seems to be the council just simply deciding to take a different approach from the Scottish Government, isn't it?
Well, it says examples could include gyms and sports halls. It doesn't say must.
It says examples of GP areas, colon. I don't think there's a could or must in there. The other thing about having enclosed areas, just in that list also is breakout areas. Examples of GP areas. Second bullet is breakout areas, and if you go and look at the diagrams above, there are a number of class bases, and in some of the diagrams it shows breakout areas which aren't enclosed classrooms. Are you saying that the council wouldn't count breakout space like that as a GP area?
So the council does include breakout area as GP areas, yeah.
Right. Okay, but it's not an enclosed classroom.
Yes. So our standard is that we wouldn't want all of our GP area to be non-enclosed, because that reduces flexibility and then you can't have an additional class. So we want some enclosed classroom GP areas, some stage, and some breakout area.
So hold on, I think what was the stage bit? So
stages can be used as GP areas.
Right.
And for example, the stage in Parkhead Primary School is used as a GP area. And for example, currently, because we're running a 15 class organisation in the school, the stage is being used as a library, because we've had to remove the library from one of the GP enclosed classrooms in order to teach a 15 class in there. And we're instead using the stage as a library, which reduces the flexibility. The school can't put a play on this year because we're using the stage as a library, but it allows us to teach 15 classes, you know, in a kind of needs must working capacity way. But ideally, you would have a stage available for drama. This year, we've had to use it as a library. So you could easily use that space as a teaching space because it doesn't have a fixed wall to the dining hall. So it'd be very difficult to teach children there while noisy dining is going on next door.
Right. Okay. And in terms of the gym, you're saying that because a gym curriculum is developed is because there's a separate gym curriculum that can't be used as a teaching area. But why can't the assembly hall be used as a GP area?
It's effectively in a school of 462 capacity, the assembly hall is being used for so much of the time for dining, but it reduces its availability for other purposes. Because by the time you're running in that size of school with a hall of that size, you're running at least 3 sessions of dining, and then you've got set up and clear up after that. Really makes the room unavailable from 11 o'clock until 2:30, which makes it very limited availability for other uses. So that's why we don't. The hall and kind of dining areas we wouldn't include in GP because of the limited time they're available for.
Okay, right. Well, that there's a number of points there, Mr. Bledowski. Do you want to respond to any of those?
I think just with regards to the library, so the example of GP areas on page 9 determining school capacity, primary school capacity, does include libraries within that. Even in a reconfigured school, I would have thought that the library connects towards the GP space.
I'm sorry, I slightly lost your. I didn't hear what you said there.
So I'm saying that in the reconfigured school, the library, my understanding is that it should still count towards GP space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're agreeing on that. Yeah, we agree that library is a GP space.
I think the question that comes to my mind is how in terms of the assembly hall and its use, that although it may be limited in hours due to the dining function, I think the question is how many hours of time would be, how many class hours each week would be expected to be used in GP spaces, and include that and also count towards it. I think working out when the GP spaces could be used and would that be sufficient. And I think with the GP hall, the gym hall as well, I think could extra flexibility be brought in through the use of the outdoor space? And my understanding is that it's a requirement for a set number of hours of physical activity, but it doesn't define that has to be within the gym hall. That could include outdoor activities as well, and whether through that use of the outdoor space, extra time could be used in the indoor GP spaces for other purposes.
The legal requirement is for 2 hours of physical activity per week, but it doesn't specify that only in good weather. So we do use the outdoor space as much as possible, but you have to deliver that whatever the weather. So you can't rely on outdoor space.
So 2 hours of physical activity or 2 hours of indoor physical activity, Mr. Podden?
It's 2 hours of physical activity, but you have to deliver that every week, whatever the weather. So you can't rely on using the outdoor space every week.
Mm-hmm.
So you need indoor space available to deliver that.
Mm-hmm. We
obviously do use the outdoor space as well, but in terms of determining the planning capacity for school, you've got to have the indoor space available.
Though isn't it, I mean, in terms of the gym, isn't it in the nature of a gym that if the class is in the gym, there's another classroom free somewhere in the school?
If you're proposing hot desking primary schools, then
I wasn't proposing anything. I was asking a question,
but look forward to seeing it suggested.
And you agree that that's not something realistic, Mr. Bledowski? No, that doesn't. If the gym is in use as a gym, it doesn't free up space elsewhere in the school.
I think that schools are generally arranged with a classroom for a year. So yes, I think that's probably a fair position.
Okay.
I'm not sure we'll be aside the room for a year is what I'm trying to get across.
Okay, that's great. I think I probably get both sides' position on this particular question. I'll look forward to seeing the council's policy document on that, and they apparently want to comment on that. The second bullet I put down is if it's accepted that the school is to be treated as having a planning capacity as 16 classroom school, where the council has said that a 16 classroom school would have a capacity of 462, or at least in this case it would do. There's a work example in the 2014 guidance that I think indicates 484 as the planning capacity of a 16 classroom school. Is there a reason why the council differs from that?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I think this matter hugely will.
It's not a big difference. I just thought I'd better clear it up.
When we get late ones, my calculation is that it'll be the same year that the issues would hit, whether it's 462 or 484. So the deficit with saying I think a huge difference. My position is I agree that determining primary school capacity shows that, but I think that it's been drawn incompetently by the Scottish Government, which may not be a popular suggestion. But
well,
yeah,
I do see one other error in it, in that it should have 19 teaching spaces rather than 18, since there should be 3 GP areas.
Yeah. So my view on it is that I don't think it shows a realistic class distribution, because that class distribution that is shown there implies a lower school of 220 children in the P1 to P3. Yeah.
Right.
And so the fact that you've got 220 children in P1 to P3 means that those year groups have more than 66 children in them. And so as soon as they move up a year, you can't fit that within the realistic class distribution of 66 per year in the P4 to P7. So effectively, it's created a realistic class distribution that only works for 1 year. Right. Thus, it's not a realistic class distribution because it's impossible to fit that. So it works for a year, but the class distribution that's shown can only work if there are 220 P1 to P3 children, and then the next year those children will be in P4, the P3s. There won't be space in a 16 class school to accommodate them. So having a class distribution that will not fit in the school the following year, to me, is not a realistic class distribution.
Is that a distinction between planning capacity and working capacity, though?
I don't believe so. I view that realistic class distribution has to be a class distribution that is sustainable for more than 1 year. So that's where my 462 comes from, and where I differ from the determining primary school capacity guidance. But it may be that you could say that that's a working versus planning capacity. But for me, creating a planning capacity that is guaranteed to fail the following year fails to meet what I would call a realistic class distribution. But obviously I admit that someone in 2014 published that and felt that it was. I would disagree. It's relatively limited disagreement.
So it's limited disagreement. Perhaps you want to comment before we move on, Mr. Bledowski.
Yeah. So well, as we stated in our statement of agreed matters, we do differ on this. So I think in terms of the approach that we take, so we follow the guidance for calculating planning capacity as set out in determining school capacity document NH 1.05. I think the difference is that when I am looking at how it can be arranged, it's looking at as if you're trying to manage a peak. So if, say, we have more P1 pupils in a year, and that will work its way through the school from P1 all the way to P7. Year on year, you can reconfigure the class to accommodate the peak. And so by doing that, you can achieve a planning capacity of 484. I think Mr. Cotton is probably right insofar as for this will work for 1 year. But I think the issue that I have is that in the next year we don't have to have the same configuration, so it doesn't have to remain a P1 class. It can then become a P2 class. So these additional classrooms can be used for different year groups in different years to accommodate peaks. So, I mean, of course, we'll have to reflect the number of pupils year on year, but I think that it is fair to say that a 484, as set out in example 3, would be achievable in the school.
Right. Okay.
And my response would be that it only works P1 to P3 classes. You can only adjust it if you apply that additional capacity in any of the P4 to P7 classes. You actually reduce the overall capacity, because you're removing a class of 33 capacity and creating a class of 25 capacity. So as soon as you create composite classes in the upper year groups, you're actually reducing the realistic class distribution planning capacity of the school. So as soon as you have a composite class in P4 to P7, actually reduces the capacity below our 462, never mind the 484. So that's why it only works in P1 to P3 classes for 484 realistic class distribution. It's impossible with any P4 to P7.
Right. No, I think I understand that. But Ms. Beddock,
again, you can view that as working rather than planning capacity, but it's just my reading of realistic is that it has to work for more than 1 year, and I believe the 2014 guidance's reading of it is that if it works for 1 year, then that's realistic. So I think that's what the disagreement is between me and the guidance.
Right, I see. Mr. Bladowski, do you disagree with that at all?
Yes, in terms of when we say that the additional classrooms would have a capacity of 25, we're using that as the minimum. So that would be either a composite classroom or a primary 1 classroom. What we're not saying is that it couldn't be used in the later years as a full classroom, depending on the floor size, of course. But it could be used up to a 33 capacity classroom. So if it depends on the pupil structure and the class structure, but that's, like I say, that's where working capacity comes in. But I think that the potential is to just use. We shouldn't be trying to treat these as fixed rooms for a specific use year on year from primary 1 all the way through to primary 7. These are spaces that can be used as required to provide that flexibility to manage peaks in requirement.
Yeah, but you'd agree that 484 is in the nature of an absolute maximum, and that if the class arrangement, if the peak had moved up to year 4, for instance, primary 4, there would be a problem fitting 484 in.
Well, it would depend on the nature of the class structure, I think.
If there were composite classes, it might be possible. Is that?
It's not possible. The 484 realistic class distribution shown in that example is only possible to achieve where the excess children are in P1 to P3. Yeah. As soon as those children are not in P1 to P3, it's impossible to achieve that distribution. So it's a structure that only works with younger children. So it's impossible for it to be a sustainable structure.
But you wouldn't disagree, Mr. Cotton, that there might be totals above 462, somewhere between 462 and 484, if there was a peak that had moved up to year 4.
If you admit more than the 66 children into a year group in P1, then as soon as those children hit P4, you have a 17 class school to meet the legal requirements.
If you're assuming,
No.
well, I think
The nature of it is as soon as those children hit P4, you need a 17th class to run the school. Because if you've got 67 children in a year group, you simply cannot run a 67 year group in P4 to P7 without a 17 class organisation. It's just not possible.
Ms. Borowski?
Well, this was a subject of discussion when we were discussing the agreed matters. We think that it is possible to have a planning capacity of 484 and to accommodate a reasonable class structure as that goes through the years. I think, however, though, that is straying into working capacity and not working capacity, and the decisions on school capacities need to be taken on the basis of planning capacity.
Okay, well, I think this. I think I've got broadly where both parties are on this. I think if it's not necessarily going to affect the overall figures, we'll perhaps move on from there. But that's helpful. Okay, the school roll projection. So obviously the appellants provided the document showing the changes in the 2020 housing land audit, which I'll get up. That's M008, isn't it? 008, yes. And figures are shown both with and without Gavi side, and we're looking at obviously the Parkhead table rather than just yet at the secondary school table. So yeah, I'm just trying to work out what the implications are for school roll, and I was trying to work back from the housing figures to the school roll figures, but I don't think that would necessarily be terribly easy. So I thought I'd better ask you what the implications are. Perhaps if I start with Mr. Bledowski this time, what's the appellant's view on since the appellant's table? What's the appellant's view on what the changes would be in terms of school roll?
So the table sets out the number of homes that were expected to be completed versus what the next housing land audit says had been completed or is now expected to be completed in that year, rather than people numbers. What it's showing is that there is a reduction generally year on year of the number of homes that were expected to be built. In terms of translating that to school, what it basically is showing is that if there's fewer annual completions, there will be fewer pupils entering the school in each year. And so that will be creating additional capacity against what was originally forecast in the LDP forecast, the Council's LDP forecast scenario, which is based on the housing expectation.
Mm.
And I don't think we would disagree with that general principle.
Okay.
One further point to mention, sir, and it may be obvious, or it may have been obvious to you already, but if you look at the very bottom row, for example, in the table that's headed difference v LDP forecast under the without Gavi side heading, each of the reductions, so the -26, the minus, just wait for that, that's a planned fire alarm.
Oh, right, okay. These things happen.
Seems to be going on for a while.
I'm very glad you don't have to get up and leave the room.
So am I. Right.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So what I was saying is, if you look at the figures at the bottom in the bottom row, -26, -164, -26, etc.
Yeah.
Those are individual years. They are not cumulative. So by the time that you've added up all of the reductions in housing, you are actually looking at a very significant reduction in the number of pupils that is likely to go through that school in that period of time.
Sorry, I think I'd set up the question, what's the impatience of the school roper? Yes, okay. Right, no, I understand that. I think it's my next question. So it was whether pupils from the proposed development can be accommodated in the school. So I think that there's an agreement between parties that Gavyside Farm, if Gavyside Farm is out of the picture, if either it doesn't go ahead or the catchment review is agreed, then Gavyside, the second table applies, and the council and the appellant are agreed that there's not a capacity problem at Parkhead Primary School, and I think that's, if I understand it correct there. My second question was, first, it's all the rather complicated bullet points, but if the Gavyside Farm development were to proceed at the pace envisaged in the 2021 audit, and I've asked the same question also about the 2022 audit after that, and the development were also to be permitted, and Gavyside Primary School is not delivered, I said by the end of this table, essentially, 2028, 2029, and the catchment review is rejected, then when is the planning capacity of the school, when's the capacity of the school likely to be exceeded? So, and obviously there's various different capacities that have been given to me for the school, so I've listed all of those. So, in terms of the calculation,
just perhaps by saying I haven't done a full calculation, but I haven't done full reforecast. It was not something that was within my possibility of doing, but I'm just trying to take the numbers and try and get a feel for what would happen. And my broad reading of it is that the points where we hit, the things are delayed but not entirely avoided, and that using the 2022 audit figures and including Gavyside, it would broadly be, excluding Gavyside, but it would broadly be 2025 that we would hit the 415 capacity, and 2020.
Sorry, excluding Gavyside.
So so yeah, excluding Gavyside, but using the 2022 housing land audit, it would be 2025. If basically it's the same for the 415 capacity, it's the same year, it's 2025. Whether or not Gavyside's coming, because there's not many Gavyside completions in either version. In the 2022 audit, nothing much is happening on Gavyside before 2025.
Right.
So with Gavyside, we would hit the 462 and 484 capacities in 2027, and with Gavyside it would be 2026. So the difference Gavyside makes is bringing it forward a year to 2026.
Mr. Constant, does that take account of the reduction in completions that have actually happened in the first 2 years?
Yes, so that's taking account of the cumulative numbers there.
Those are not cumulative; those are annual numbers.
Yeah, I added them up. Yeah. So.
I think so the difficulty that we had when we looked at this question is, based on what's in the agreed statement of matters, we can't foresee a situation where that would ever arise. Because what you've asked is a hypothetical question where Gavyside proceeds at the pace envisaged in the 2021 housing land audit. Well, we know that that's not going to happen. The proposed development were also to be permitted. We can park that for a moment. And Gavyside Primary School is not delivered by the start of 2028-29, but the catchment review is rejected. Now, my understanding, we'll come on to discuss Gavyside in a bit more detail later, but my understanding is that the council's not in a position where it would allow planning permission to be granted for Gavyside unless either the catchment review is approved or alternatively there is some as yet unidentified mitigation solution for Gabbieside.
Yeah.
So we couldn't foresee a situation where the 4 bullet points that your questions are predicated on would ever arise.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question later. I really wanted to focus in on if this theoretical situation happened, when would the capacity of the primary school be exceeded? If it is going to be exceeded, I mean, I understand your point, but I understand it's the council's position that you know, the application
in the LDP scenario, which is that the capacity would be exceeded in 2024 in the LDP scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I think that is postponed a year from 2024 to 2025.
That's with Gabbieside on the basis of the 2021 housing land audit.
But 2022 I've used. I didn't do 2021 because it seemed a bit pointless. I thought we may as well just use the most recent.
2022. Okay.
Sorry about that. But so with or without Gabbieside, the 415 capacity is postponed from a 2024 breach to a 2025 breach.
With or without?
With or without. I got the same answer with both. Just because in the 2022 audit, there's very few Gabbieside completions anticipated prior to 2025.
Right. Even though far fewer houses are being built in 38 fewer houses, 55 fewer houses. Yeah, I suppose we have to compare it with the
we can look at the actual, which is that the LDP scenario forecast an actual for August 2022 of 374.
Just a moment. Let me get hold. I've not stupidly I've not actually got the. It's in the preliminary education report, and I haven't got that open. And the preliminary education report is
PA.
Yeah.
PA 1.13.
I'm sorry, how stupid of me.
It's paragraph 1.65, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry. Further, sorry. 1.7. 1.73.
Oh, there we go. That over there. Right. Okay. Good. I've got it now. So we've got the base forecast is 2024-25 is 314. The LDP forecast, we're assuming the base forecast remains as is. The LDP forecast is 446. We've got in this document, we've got 24-25. We've got 38 fewer houses in 2023-24, and 55 fewer houses with Gabbieside 24-25. So you're saying it's 25-26 that or 24-25 that the
25-26, I think it would be
25-26. Okay.
And for a realistic sense check, we can look at 22-23 from the forecast and compare it to actual. So the base forecast there is 318.
Right. Yeah.
And the LDP scenario is 374.
Right.
And we know that the actual is 355.
Right.
Because
355. Okay. Right. That's the current one. Right.
those children, well, the actual is
they're in school at the moment.
We know are there because we're now 2 years post forecast date, so we can see.
Sorry, can I just ask for clarification? We've not been provided this evidence from the council or information from the council, I don't think.
Right.
No, so it was only looking at this. I had to look at, to answer these questions, I had to look at those. So apologies that you haven't seen that. Effectively, the 374, we're somewhere between the 318 and the 374. So it's saying that we're not hitting the LDP levels, which is what we'd expect because the housing land audit has shown we've been built slower. But there have still been some completions and there has been an increase in roll compared to the base forecast, which is the situation. So for a sense check, what Geddes have shown with these numbers of there's less completions, so they would expect it to be slower than the LDP scenario. The real world has shown the same thing, but we're higher than the base forecast, but we're lower than the LDP scenario. So I broadly agree with what Geddes is saying, but it will take longer to hit those peaks, but the roll is still going up, and that's shown in the real world numbers as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
think, sir, we would want the opportunity. We would want the opportunity to see that written down and have the opportunity to comment, because you'll appreciate that numbers flying about and a reference to tables that nobody's seen is not very helpful for anybody.
No, indeed, no.
It's just an actual number for this year. I just used to sense check.
Mr. Cotton, I'm just trying to clarify where this information is coming from. So.
Yeah, to know, I understand, and you obviously you've done a full forecast, but Mr. Cotton, but you've made some calculations. Would it be possible to provide those on paper?
I can do. It's not in the nature really of a forecast. I've just tried to take the reduction numbers and really just kind of use the child house ratio and try and think where that might be. It's not really a forecast for each year, but just to kind of to try and look at what percentage we would think that's going to go down and where we would hit it. And so I'm not doing a forecast of what number I think each year. I've just done based on these how long I think that delay happens for, based on the percentage of completions that are moved.
So essentially the appropriate method would be, or an appropriate method to get a rough estimate would be to take the reduction in the number of houses for any given year, and calculate the child house ratio from that, and then subtract the number of children produced from the projection, the LDP forecast. Is that an appropriate way of doing it?
Yes, although there's a delay in terms of the child house ratio doesn't appear immediately, so you've got to apply a delay on when they're going to apply. So the forecasting assumes that not all the children appear on the day the house is built. Because broadly speaking, people move into new houses with 3-year-olds and then they appear in the P1, a year or 2 or 3 or 4 years later. So not all of the child house ratio appears in year 1. We tend to find 50% appears in year 1. So you can't apply the reduction immediately. Because effectively the forecasts were not assuming that all the children would appear immediately.
Right.
Okay. If that makes sense. If I transcribe, the forecast assumes if 100 houses are built, it assumes 28 children will appear in the primary school, but it only thinks 14 of those will appear in the first year after the house is built.
Okay.
So if you're deducting them, you need to deduct them at the same speed as you were adding them.
Right. Okay.
It's more complicated than that, but
yes, I think it would be very, very helpful to see it written down, even if we accept that it's a rough estimate rather than the.
I can certainly provide something written down, but like I say, I haven't forecast individual numbers for each year. I've just attempted to forecast which year I think we would likely hit the 415, 462 and 484 barriers.
Okay. Just turn to the appellant. Mr. Bedowski, attempted a similar explanation.
Sorry, just to ask, your position is, Mr. Cotton, that for 410 figure will be breached, but the other figures will not be breached.
The 415
No, it's-
capacity would be breached in
the
2025, 26 is what I've got written down.
Yeah, so August 25, 26, whether or not Garryside is included. Because broadly speaking, the table that Geddes have produced shows the same numbers for 2021 to 23, 24, whether or not you exclude Garryside. Then the 462 and 484 capacities will be reached in August 2027, excluding Garryside, but August 2026, including Garryside. So removing Garryside and using the 2022 HLA postpones it for 2 years.
Mhm.
Only 1 year if you include Garryside.
Mhm.
The LDP scenario had us at 471 in 2025.
Mhm. Did you do 484?
It's the same. So effectively, there's not enough of a difference between 462 and 484 to change it a year.
Right. Okay.
Which was why I was saying it probably wasn't worth spending too much time on.
Right. Fair enough.
So that was some very rough estimates I was doing rather than forecasting. We're just trying to get these numbers and think about how much of a delay they would create. But we're doing this as a new forecasting, which I don't have.
Mhm.
So I think in response, I'll just say we're reserved our position on that, and we will want to see that in writing. We'll come back and give you comments on that, I think.
Okay. But does the appellant have their own view on when the capacities might be exceeded on the 2022 draft housing land audit?
I go back to what I said at the beginning. We did not attempt a capacity assessment because we don't envisage a scenario where
Okay.
Garryside development proceeds in the circumstances that you've hypothecated.
Right.
That's the slide, Stephen.
Oh, the size hypothecated. Yes. But council's position now, which I have to say I hadn't understood from the statement of agreed matters, is that there would be there would potentially be all right. Oh no, it's only if, yes, okay. But you would say Garryside is excluded, but of course the council position is even without Garryside, there would be a capacity issue arising in 20, 25, 26 Parkhead.
Without the extension.
Without the extension, yeah.
Yeah, because if actually the 2022 housing land audit has 328 completions in the 5-year period, 22 to 27 within West Calder. Need to put in Polbeck as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is in Polbeck.
There's no agreement, there's no statement in the agreed matters on when the extension might be delivered at Parkhead. No.
No, it's not fully funded at the moment. It's dependent on when housing comes forward. But I think broadly speaking, our position is that if all of that housing in the LDP came forward, we'd have the money to build the extension because all of the allocated housing that's paying towards it would have come forward. So I think we'd be arguing, but it wouldn't be able to.
All right.
Just to clarify, Mr. Cotton, just in part of the hearing statement, I think the intention was at the latest August 2026 for it to be built. All right.
Yes.
Just try to get that. Yeah.
I think would be our expectation as to when it could be delivered. That would be the earliest it could be delivered. But I think in terms of there was a question of whether it's a committed, I think is the wording in policy HOU2 is committed infrastructure. At the moment it's not committed because we don't have full funding in place from developers. But equally, full child product if the developments don't come forward. So I wouldn't be disputing we would have money to build it if the developments come forward. It's not yet committed in terms of we only have a committed project when we have the developer funding available to carry out the project. That makes sense.
Yes, but in a way that isn't that a similar position to Gavy's side is if the housing doesn't come forward, then the pupils don't appear. And if the housing does come forward, then the contributions come forward too.
It's similar, but perhaps slightly more nuanced with Parkhead because it's multiple smaller developments. So there isn't a single. Whereas with Gavy's side, there's a single trigger of you don't grant that unless for Section 75 is there and the money's there. But with smaller developments that come forward piecemeal, you don't refuse them because you haven't got all the money, but you do get some of the child product. So if we have all of the child product, we'll have all of the money. But there's interim bits where you have some of the child product and some of the money, not enough money to build the extension. But all the child, we'll have all the money and we will build it. There's difficult bits on the road to get there. It's the nature of education planning and the council is, but you don't have all the money up front and you just have to do the best you can. So
I think I get that. Mr. The panel, have you got anything comment on that? Obviously you want to see the figures that Mr. Cotton is relying on.
Yes, we do, sir. I think that's probably all that I would want to say on the figures. Maybe just touching on the issue about the extension, and that looks like it's the next question in any event. Question 1D. And just to clarify a couple of points around some of Mr. Cotton's comments there. As we understand it, the 2-class extension to Parkhead Primary School is effectively a council commitment because it is in the action programme. And I'll just pause there and ask, is that correct?
So it's a commitment, but we will deliver it if we have the developer funding in to deliver it. So it's in the action programme and it isn't yet fully funded. And what I can say is that in our current capital programme, there is no money assigned for delivering developer funded projects that we can subsidise or forward fund developer funded projects. As in previous years, there has been budget available for that, but with the current nature of local government budgets, we no longer have any allowance for forward funding projects. So basically, we will only commit to tendering a project when we have 100% of the money we need to deliver it in place. So from our position, it's not committed until we have the money in our hands to the end of the budget.
And that you've answered the question I was going to ask, which is when you say have the funding in place, you mean that you have the cash actually in your account. Sir, you may remember that in the Hellent's commentary on the Planning Authority's response, so this goes way back to the beginning of the appeal.
It's document MH 0.02.
Right.
You can have a look at that just now, sir, if you like, or have a look at your leisure. But I just wanted to direct you to a particular section of that. So paragraph 4.6 onwards explains what happened at the West Lothian Local Development Plan examination, the last one. And there was quite a lot of discussion at that examination about the council's approach to education infrastructure and funding. And in essence, the the issue that Mr. Cotton's identified there was the subject of quite a lot of discussion at the examination, and the reporter who considered the examination appears to have concluded that the council's approach was wrong. I'll maybe just summarise or just read you a brief section from paragraph 4.7. So, evidence that was given to the examination, one of the participants had asserted that the council's position ignored the way in which the matter had been approached and was essentially a closed loop where there are capacity constraints, so no consents are granted, so no development commences, so no contributions are paid, so no capacity expansion is provided, so no consents are granted, and so on. And the reporter said this in response to that: this succinctly captures the substance of the issue. Should such an approach be taken by the council in implementing the proposed plan once adopted, education capacity in particular will continue to significantly constrain development and likely to lead to further refusals of planning permission. And he then went on to recommend certain changes to the infrastructure policy to avoid precisely what Mr. Cotton has described happening in practice during the implementation of this LDP.
I'm happy to accept that's what the reporter said at the time. I think what we have to rely on is the wording that the reporter chose to put in policy INF1, the local development plan. And that wording says development will not be permitted to commence unless funding, including any contribution from developer obligations, the necessary infrastructure is fully committed and that infrastructure is capable of being delivered. So my understanding is that's a clear statement that funding has to be fully committed.
Yes, and I think that
then it can be permitted to commence. So no, I think whatever comments we made, but there's a nice clear statement of policy INF1 on. We would be following that policy INF1 as the reporter re-voted.
And I think
I had put that question down for discussion later on, but if we want to deal with it now, I'm happy to deal with it now.
So that's helpful. Well, as long as it's helpful for you. The issue between us, I think, is what does that word or what does that phrase in policy INF1 about the funding being committed, what does that actually mean? I mean, Mr. Cotton's explained that the council's position is that committed doesn't just mean there's a contractual commitment to provide that money by way of developer contribution at certain parts during the development in question. The council's position seems to be that committed means you've contractually committed to it and you've actually paid the money to the council. And that is not what policy INF1 says. That's precisely what the reporter deprecated when he considered the council's approach to date. That's why he made the changes to INF1.
Okay.
I think we certainly don't take a position that developers cannot commence until every penny has been paid. But that's certainly not. We have, all developments in West Lothian have payments that are staggered. So that certainly is not a position that we take. But equally, we can't take a position that as soon as the Section 75 is signed, we can assume that that money is definitely going to come forward, because we've got signed Section 75s on, I've got a 2009 consent for 600 houses, hasn't had a single one built, but which has been implemented by putting a driveway in. So I can't just say a Section 75 has been signed, so the money is definitely going to come forward at the dates specified. So we take a position somewhere between that, but so you have to take a realistic assessment of what's happening, and that effectively is what the housing land audit is taking that feedback from developers and landowners and saying where we are with projects. And so we're trying to look at which sites are coming forward at what speed and when the money will be coming forward from them. So there's a line somewhere between every penny in the bank account and what's realistically coming forward. And just having a signed Section 75 is not sufficient to give us confidence that we can proceed with the project.
Okay, so your criterion is essentially the housing land audit. That's when the houses are coming forward. Is that right?
housing land audit, and then an element of realism applied to every year in the housing land audit. Every developer tells us that they're definitely going to succeed, and not every. Some developers build faster than expected, some build slower. So you have to have an element of realism applied to it as well. But
as a kind of broad average in a particular
broad average, it's a good starting point.
So if the housing land audit is telling you that the capacity of the school, well, let's say with this proposed development is going to be exceeded in 2025-26, whether or not Gavi site is excluded, then but you've got those houses coming forward. And you've got funds committed in Section 75 agreements in relation to those developments. Would you not at that point take the extension as being, or the funds for the extension as being committed?
So we wouldn't take it as being committed until I've actually got a decision of the council. As an officer, I can't commit the council to spend.
No, indeed.
It needs to be decided through the programme. At the moment, the council programme says the money provided for Parkhead extension is coming from developers. So if money does not come forward from developers, then the extension will not happen.
But on the broad criterion you've given us, presumably the money would be coming forward from the developers to make that extension in August 2026.
I would hope so, but I can't guarantee it.
Right.
So it all depends on who we find committed. It's committed in that we wish to deliver it, but I can't guarantee that it will be delivered until I have the money to deliver it.
Yes, but not the cash in your bank account.
Not just on bank account, but sort of a realistic view that enough development is coming forward to generate enough money to pay for it.
So in this particular case, when would you be in a position to take that view?
So it would probably be August 2024. If we're looking at a 2026 delivery, it's probably a 15-month build, something like that. So you'd be looking at late 2024, making a commitment to build in.
What evidence would you be taking into account in August 2024? So
in August 2024, you're taking into account how many of the sites that are currently identified in the housing land audit, the contributing sites for that extension, how many of those have gone forward, how many completions there's been, how many trigger points have been hit. And even where the developers have paid their money on hitting the trigger points, it's not unknown for developers to fail to pay their invoiced payments. That's another thing you have to take into account.
But it's
got some payments outstanding, £2 million outstanding from 2016. It's just been another. So it's not unknown for developers to just not pay.
Mr. Cotton, sorry.
So I just had one other question. That was whether it's council's position that I shouldn't take a decision on this, or no decision on this particular application should be taken until August 2024, when the council is in a position to know what capacity there will be at Parkhead Primary School. Or at least it's premature until August 2024.
My position is that the extension is slightly irrelevant in your consideration, because the numbers show that we'll reach the extended capacity fairly quickly afterwards, and thus whether or not the school is extended is not really a relevant part of your decision-making process, because the 462 or 484 capacity will quickly be reached after the 415 capacity. So extended or not doesn't really make a huge difference. The duration would be my view.
Okay. Or look at the appellant.
Well, again, on that final point, I think we do need to see the calculations to be able to comment on those. I think as a general observation, I think from what Mr. Cotton's saying is that if you leave aside the specific numbers in this case, what Mr. Cotton seems to be saying is that the council takes a view. in enough time. Your point, sir, was if your housing land audit is showing that there's a capacity concern coming down the tracks, wouldn't you then take that as an indication that you should go ahead and build the school, because you know the houses are going to be built, you know you're going to get the money from them, and therefore the school should be built? And I think Mr. Cotton's answer, it essentially shows that the council will take decisions to build schools in sufficient time to alleviate capacity constraints, where it has contractual commitment, not just, it doesn't have to be the money in the bank account, I think, from what he was saying.
Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying.
I think that's a reasonable summary, yeah. But I think just in terms of extension, our position is that the allocated sites in the Parkhead catchment will use up all the capacity of extension and not leave any for this development. And that then there is not, on the site of Parkhead, there's not a viable extension beyond a two-stream school as yet been designed or outlined. So effectively the extension will come forward if the 500 odd units in the housing land audit in the catchment come forward, and they won't if they don't. But if they do come forward, there isn't any spare capacity left for this development. Is effectively my position.
We'll need to see. That would be useful to see your figures on that. Yeah.
On that note, sir, it would be helpful because the council referred to they have £700,000 in the bank account for the 1.7 million. So the council has identified that there's a deficit of 1 million to deliver. Would you be able to share that, Mr. Cotton, about the accumulated sums and at what point in time that was done?
Sorry, where are you getting that from, Mr. Aldrich?
So in council hearing statements, that's WLC 44 and paragraph 3.14.
This is the table, yeah.
It's their response to you, sir.
Yeah.
And in there they say they have accumulated £700,000. Pension's going to cost 1.7 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there's any more I can say on that. That is the amount that we've accumulated. So I'm not really sure what more information I could give you there.
Mm-hmm.
What date is that from, Mr. Cotton? That matters, because obviously there's a period of time between when the forecasting was done and the completions that have been done in the last couple of years. So it's important to understand there has been house building going on, and I just want to understand.
There is, whatever date I wrote that hearing statement, I will have looked up the number. We just have a bank account with the money sat in it, and I just looked at what the balance of the bank account was.
Yeah.
So the date I wrote the hearing statement, I looked up the bank account to see how much money was sat in the bank account that is labelled Parkhead Primary School Extension, yes. And that was the amount in there. November 22. So yeah, November 22. That's it. So that was how much was sat in the bank account. November 22.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you draw from that, Mr. Salter?
If you look at the programming from 22, 23, 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, and the draft housing land audit work, so it would appear to me there's around another £900,000 to come in from their programming. And if the appeal proposal came forward as well, that would be another £300,000 on top of that from developer contributions. So in total, there would be over. So that would be 900,000 plus 300,000, 1.2 million plus 700,000 gives you 1.9 million. Mm-hmm. So that would be more than what is required to deliver the extension.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. In theory, that's exactly what should happen. But the numbers in the housing land audit should add up to the remaining amount needed for the extension. But just what I'm saying is, once you've built that extension, there isn't any capacity left for this development. Is my position. I'm saying that allocating houses in the housing land audit create enough money to build the extension and build enough capacity for those units. But at no point have we ever designed or kind of worked on an extension that would be enough for the allocated units. And
Mr. Cotton, as part of the as part of the statement of agreed matters, in relation to point 15, you said both parties agree that the Gaviside catchment review is successful. There is capacity for the appeal proposal.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'd understood. Yeah. Council changing that position, or
that's what we agree. Even we spent a lot of time through this.
I have agreed that, in which case, possibly shouldn't have done, but I apologise. I think I struggle with, now I'm looking at the numbers, but having had the request from Mr. Seaton to try and look back at those numbers, but it looks to me like the numbers don't quite work even without Gaviside. So apologies for having agreed to something that turned out not to be the case once I looked at the numbers that Mr. Seaton had set out.
We're going to need to see those numbers.
See those numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
And
just in terms of, the kind of broad comparison of the proposed development and the table without Gaviside for Parkhead Primary School. There are 250 houses in the development, as I understand it.
Yes.
Between 221, between 2020, 21 and 2026, 2027, or 2025, 2026, when the excess occurs, there seems to be there's a big subtraction, even if you take it from the present year. So that's, yes, this is 2022-23. So you've got 26 fewer houses in 2022-23, 38 fewer houses in 23-24, 103 fewer houses. That's more houses taken off the housing land order or in the development.
Houses.
Sorry?
441 houses over that period.
From 2021. From
2022, 23 to 26, 27. There is, based on the draft housing land audit without Gaviside, there is 441 fewer homes being built, programmed to be built. Applying the council's pupil ratio, which is 0.28.
Yeah.
Applying that would be 123 pupils less.
Yeah.
The pupil generally from the appeal proposal would be, you asked me.
36.
That's it.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, I think it's 88.
88 in total, was it? And 70 for, so, yeah, so 70.
I'm not even sure if we need to go into the calculating the number of pupils. If fewer houses, if Gaviside is removed and there are fewer houses, and that subtracts more houses than there are in the development, then surely it would follow that there is capacity, or at least if the primary school is going to exceed capacity, it's not because of the proposed development.
Correct.
Well, Mr. Cotton, you're sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Possibly the thing to bear in mind is that it was always our expectation that the Gaviside children would be removed from Parkhead once the school opened, whether or not they're removed through catchment review. So that there is no long-term anticipation of Gaviside children attending Parkhead in the forecast. Or there is in the forecast, in our plans. So the intention has always been, the extension of Parkhead is to allow the 500 houses allocated in the local development plan within the long-term Parkhead catchment, which is excluding Gaviside. So the question is not And although these numbers are showing a reduction, it's a postponement, not a reduction. The housing land audit doesn't have any less completions anticipated for the Parkhead catchment. It's just expecting to come forward slightly slower. So there are still 500 non-Gabby side completions anticipated in the housing land audit within the Parkhead catchment. And then this is another 250 on top of that. So effectively that 500, our 0.28 ratio is 140 children. But the current capacity, the current role of the school is 355. So, you can see, just on that, which is not how it worked before, because it's not more complicated than that. But if you just add the 140 to 355, that's 490 without this development taking place and without Gabby-side.
The issue is one of programming. I mean, I think what we're talking about here are total numbers. And what this has demonstrated, what this table demonstrates, and what we thought had been agreed, was that there had been a significant amount of capacity created because a number of the sites that the council assumed would be built out have not been built out. Now, yes, we accept that most of those will probably come forward at some point in time. When they come forward may be a matter for debate, but those are factors that are relevant to the whole question of capacity for the lifetime of this development and the success or otherwise of proposed mitigation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think the council's original position was that capacity problems were interim problems rather than a kind of this can never be done.
It all depends how quickly the sites all come forward. At the moment, looking at the numbers in the housing land audit and is the appellant's position that they intend to build out their 250 relatively quickly, it creates a problem that goes above the running capacity of the school. It may fall back after that. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, the numbers of completions that I've got over the next 5 years, taking into account the 500 in the housing land audit plus 250 that will be added in by this development, gives me 750 completions in the next 5 years, which takes us over capacity.
Yeah. But I mean, are you telling me that if this development was to be consented now, the council wouldn't have time by 2025, 26, or if the extension is built by, I've got the date noted, it was 2026, 27, to find a solution to the problem?
We can extend 462. I'm not aware that anyone has proposed or costed or anticipated a solution of creating capacity beyond 462.
Mm. But there is
we haven't designed or costed one, and the appellant has not, as far as I'm aware, put forward any extension beyond 462 or 484 capacity.
If I was, for instance, to issue a notice of intention on the basis that I thought, it's likely that some kind of solution could be found, would that not be a matter for negotiation between the council and the appellant when it came to looking at the Section 75 agreement?
I'm not sure that the appellant has put forward any evidence that the site of the school is large enough or possible to have a capacity beyond 462 on.
Well, to be fair, the appellant was under the impression that there would be capacity, because that's what the council and the appellant agreed.
Well, yes, that's true, and apologies for that. But it's just when looking at these numbers, I'm struggling to get it to add up. So if you were to put forward, if it was something more like a phasing agreement of building the houses slower so that we didn't hit that peak, that sort of thing, but it might be more achievable, because it does look like it's the speed with which everything is coming forward that's causing the problem.
Mm-hmm. All right. Sorry, I think I should take a comment from the appellant. Is there anything to respond to there? You'd wish to respond to, or do we simply need to see Mr. Cotton's numbers?
I think, sir, it's probably going to be the most useful use of your time if we wait to see the numbers.
Right.
We'll then give you a submission based on whatever it is the council is able to produce.
Okay, good. All right. Well, it's 25 to 12 now. What I suggest is that we take a short break, and then we return to look at West Calder High School and the questions I've got on that, and the other remaining general questions that I have. Okay. So if we take a break till say 25 to, is that sufficient for everyone? 25 to 12.
25 to now.
Oh. Right, so West Calder High School. No, well, 1:45 then.
1:45?
1:45, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
not sure. I've got a kind of odd view of the appellant, so I'm not sure if everyone is back. Ah, yes, that looks like Mr. MacLeod. So is everyone back with you?
They are. I'm going to make a slight adjustment, and I might actually put the lines down as well. Just give me 1 second, sir.
Of course, yeah.
Apologies, we're having a slight camera issue at our end. Just give me 1 second.
My mic off so you don't hear me slurp.
Sorry about that. Can you hear and see us okay now?
Yes, I can. Yes, and good. Okay, council can too. Right. Okay, so on West Calder High School, my first question really came up simply because the council, the appellant had suggested that the council's basis for reaching its capacity of 1,100 should be examined. So I just wanted to check whether the appellant's satisfied with the council's approach to calculating capacity set out in its hearing statement.
We have some issues with the approach that the council's taken. They're probably not sufficient to spend time discussing it today, because we are going to be discussing the extension or the extended version of the school ultimately. So we're happy to park that issue, sir.
Okay, right. Right. Okay. But I mean, the extension presumably wouldn't take issue with the capacity of the school after the extension, then.
No, we're content.
Good. Okay. Grand. Right. So in terms of the school roll projection, I mean, it's a similar question to my one about Parkhead. So if the Gowrie site development were to proceed, base envisaged in the 2021 audit or the 2022 audit, I presume Mr. Cotton has worked on the 2022 draft audit rather than 2021. And proposed development were also to be permitted, but the Calderwood Secondary School is not completed by the start of 28-29. Then when is it likely that the capacity of the school will be exceeded?
So possibly the difference of starting point that we need to take into account with West Calder High School is that, unlike with Parkhead, the current role for West Calder High School is higher than in the LDP version of the forecast, because there's been more completions anticipated. overall in the West Calder High School catchment, and a higher demand than anticipated for West Calder High School. So again, it's a figure that hasn't been presented up to now, but the current role of West Calder High School is at number is 1038, whereas in the 2020 based forecasts it was for 992. It's the expectation this year.
So that's actually exceeding the planning capacity as stated by the council at the moment.
The plan cost is 1100 and it's 1038.
Oh, sorry.
So we're still 62 below, but we're 46 higher than the forecast anticipated this year, despite the numbers obviously that getting provided showed there had been fewer completions, excluding Gaveside, with or without Gaveside, but the forecast roll is already higher.
Okay, no, I understand. Okay.
So maximum starting point is to take the 1038, but we know we have. And the numbers, looking at the numbers broadly.
How did just before you go on to the numbers, what was your method then? If you weren't able to use the roll predictions that have already been given.
So I just looked at the current roll and then the anticipated reductions that the Geddes numbers have shown in future years, and then looked at the differences to look at. We would expect the numbers still to continue going up, but maybe by less than were expected in the LDP forecast, basically taking out Gaveside and without Gaveside. But they're less dramatic changes as a percentage of the overall figure, so we make a smaller change. And broadly, I don't really think it changes the situation. I think we're exceeding the 1100 capacity in 2024, and we're exceeding the 1320 capacity in 2027.
I'll just get hold of the table in the preliminary education review for. That's it, right? So that was. So it's very slightly moved on. So 2024. Previously, it was 2023, 24. That 1100 was being exceeded. You're saying it's 24, 25, and then.
Previously, it was exceeded in 2025 previously, excluding Gaveside.
Okay. Right.
Again, postpones the issue rather than eliminates it.
Yeah, and obviously we're very grateful if you could provide those figures. But sorry, I should have asked. Do you know when presumably you'd be able to provide them by return, or is that your estimate?
Yes, I can provide them by return. Yeah, but like I say, it's not a full forecast of a number for each year, but just an anticipated which year I think they're going to reach.
It's just essentially setting out what your oral evidence is, and so we understand it's your broad estimate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there? Can't have a comment on that.
I was just going to say, sir, in sending over those numbers, would Mr. Cotton be able to maybe set out in a series of bullet points any assumptions that he has made or where he's obtained the figures from? Because I think inevitably we're going to have to consider those and with a view to responding.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I'm not sure it's as formal as a methodology, really. It's more sort of concept of how I've considered the question, looking at the forecast and especially taking the sort of the change in percentage of completions anticipated and reducing the increase by a similar percentage and seeing what ballpark you'd end up in. That's the way I've done it.
Right. So I'd understood it that you were, well, you no doubt set it out in detail, but I'd understood it you were taking the subtracted number of houses from the for each year and calculating the child per house ratio for that subtracted number of houses and subtracting that from the LDP projection.
Broadly speaking, yes. So,
Right.
saying that we anticipated that, but you've got to take into account the base forecast, because before the role would potentially be falling or increasing from the base anyway. So you've got to allow the base. So if what I was doing is saying, well, if the forecast was saying the increase was going to be 100, but now the number of houses has gone down by 20%, then the increase is likely to be 80 instead of 100. If that makes sense.
Sorry, you might need that.
Perhaps an increase. If the forecast was saying that the increase would be 100 houses, that would be 100 children, but the number of houses in the kind of agreed comparison has gone down by 20%, then effectively you would expect the increase to decrease from 100 to an increase of 80 if there's 20% less houses than forecast.
So the number of pupils would decrease by 20% in the same way from the increase of houses. Yeah, the number of pupils from the increase of houses.
I'm assuming whatever reduction in housing percentage there is, there'll be a similar reduction in child increase, and then you look at what number you end up with at the end of that.
Right. Okay. Right. So is there anything arising from that approach, or should we just wait till we see the figures? I'm looking at balance.
There's maybe just one point of clarity, and actually it arises from your question, I think, to the council at the end of question 2C. You say, sir, to what extent would a development producing 45 pupils have a significant effect on the capacity of a school for 1,320 pupils? Excuse me, and the council can answer that in due course. But the 45 pupils is the total number of secondary pupils envisaged from this development. It's not the total number of non-denominational pupils that would go to West Calder High School. Now we've looked at the percentages, and I'll maybe hand over to Mr. Bladowski to make sure that I've got the numbers correct. But I think in essence you apply a factor of 0.14 to the number of houses rather than 0.18,
right?
Which is the total.
Yeah, I think Mr. Scotton, you'd said that this development would be right average, and I noticed for the primary school you're using a figure of 0.28 rather than 0.35. So I take it you accept 0.14 is the correct figure.
I would think so. My gut feel is it would probably be slightly higher in West Calder, just because distance to the denominational secondary school is relatively high, and the non-denominational secondary school is in the same settlement. And my experience is that where that's the case, we would see a slightly higher percentage. But I think if actually 0.14 is 35 children, it was all 0.18 would be 45. If you asked me to guess, my gut feeling would be it would be more like 40 from this development rather than the 35 at 0.45. It wouldn't be hugely off, but I think we'd get slightly fewer wanting denominational secondary school in the development where denominational secondary school is not in the town, the non-denominational school is. Just the experience shows us that it tends to be a slightly higher ND, but it would be marginal.
Right. So my figure for 45 is incorrect. It would be somewhere between 35 and 40, or somewhere around
40 would be my expectation. Yes.
Right. Okay.
45 is the total number of secondary school children. Some of whom will attend denominational secondary, but probably less than the 10 we would expect if they were building in a town but had a denominational secondary school present in the town.
And then just to broaden that out slightly in terms of the wider role projections, does the council assume 0.18 for all of the houses that are involved in that role projection for West Calder, or is it 0.14, or is it somewhere in between?
That's the one in preliminary education review. Yeah. Okay.
So in the forecasting, we assume that there'll be 0.18 children attending secondary school. And then we look at historical secondary school preferences in an area. That's then So depending on each area you build, so it would vary in different parts of the West Calder High School catchment as to how many we would anticipate to attend a denominational secondary school versus non-denominational secondary school. So, for example, in Mid Calder, which is within the West Calder High School catchment, they're within walking distance of St Margaret's Academy denominational secondary school. So you would probably get more children attending the denominational school within walking distance, as opposed to having to be bused to West Calder High School. Whereas in West Calder, I would expect slightly more for West Calder High School. But again, it's small numbers either way. They'll still be. So in some places, it might be 0.12 and 0.06 for denominational, in others 0.14 for non-denominational, in other places 0.15 or 0.16. So it's marginal.
I mean, in your hearing statement, I think you'd said this development would be about average for West Lothian, but you're saying it would perhaps be a little on the higher side.
Perhaps a little on the higher side at secondary level. I think primary level would be about average.
Right. Okay. Right.
Because at primary level, there's a non-denominational and a denominational school, both within walking distance, and that very much tends to be the choices. What's a walking distance to schools? Where you've got both within walking distance, tends to be average. Where there's busing versus not busing, there tends to be a preference the other way. So at secondary, you'd be bused versus not bused, so it would be a slight preference change there.
Okay.
So is there something, I may have missed it, but is there something that actually shows how that's all broken down in the council's forecasting? I.e. the assumed percentage of denominational to non-denominational pupils from individual developments?
There's the methodology statement for the school roll forecasts, which I'm not sure if that was. I'm not sure if you submitted that.
Is that not in evidence? Yeah,
I think it might be in evidence. It's the educate methodology statement. Explains the methodology. We didn't submit it, but I have a feeling that the appellant did.
We submitted a committee paper which gives a summary of the methodology, and so it explains the different scenarios. Document MH2.13. But we didn't submit the, I believe is it edge analytics?
And that's the exact one, yes.
Yes, so we didn't submit that. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. It is at the back of the committee paper.
Yes, yeah. It's the appendix 2 of the committee paper. What it doesn't have is an exact ratio, because it's not an exact ratio. It's you're taking the 0.18 and allocating it depending on historical preferences in each, what we call a catchment block, which is effectively analogous to a non-denominational primary school catchment. So there isn't a set ratio. It's just the forecasting model looks at parental preference over the previous 5 years in that area, and then assumes that new build will have a similar preference split.
Do you have it in front of you, Mr. Cotton?
I don't know.
It's MH 2.13, and it's at the end of MH 2.13. It would just be helpful if you could point us to the bit that you're referring to. I think there's a section 3 forecast methodology in that on electronic page 26 or 29 of that document. Have you got it?
You're still trying to open that. go to Williams. Go to the Education Executive, 2021 August. August 24, 2021.
Here.
Set.
If one of the just Mr. McLeod or
we just got it now.
Oh, you got it. Okay. I was just thinking if you have something to hand, you could maybe email it to the to the council. But they've got it.
It's the transition.
So in paragraph 2.7, there's primary pupil yield factor and secondary pupil yield factor.
Mm.
And that's as we know. And then there's section 3, which has the forecast methodology.
Yeah. So is so it's 3.11 is the 3.
Right.
Yeah, 3.11 and 3.12
Right.
is the element here. So it's to derive a set of transition rates for each primary catchment block. School census data is used to compare the total number of resident pupils, and then derive a set of inflow adjustments for each school. School census data is used to determine pupils resident outside West Lothian.
For
each.
Those are primary school pupils, aren't they? That's.
Oh wait, it's we can go to secondary intake. So yeah, it'd be.
And that's 320 and 321 is the.
Yes, it's 319, 320, 321. So it says the same thing but with secondary. So effectively, to derive a set of transition rates for each primary catchment block, school census data is used to compare the total number of resident S1 pupils in the base year, the number of resident S1 pupils attending each school in the same year. So effectively, in layman's terms, what that's saying is that you look at how many children live in the catchment block, that the catchment blocks correspond to the non-denominational primary school catchments. So that we look at how many children going into S1 live in that block, and then they say how many attend each school. So it's not even assuming everyone attends the catchment school. It's saying if there's 100 children living there, 50 of them attend the non-denominational catchment secondary, 10 attend a different non-denominational secondary, 20 attend the denominational catchment secondary, and so on. And then this building is applied, it's assumed there'll be a similar pattern to the children living there. So that's the way it's done. So it's not exact to the 0.14, 0.04, but that's a good rule of thumb that averages out over West Lothian is the 0.14, 0.04 split. The way the forecast does it is to look at each individual primary school catchment as a different split. So it's not a published number that we have. I don't know what it is. I send them, and it changes each time we do the forecast. I send the school census data, and then the forecast is done based on what the historical preferences have been over the previous 5 years.
Does that answer your point, Mr. McLeod?
It is helpful, actually, because I think in essence what Mr. Cotton's saying is that the model that the council uses has that percentage split built into it on a catchment by catchment basis. One ancillary question for the council. I mean, we're looking back at the preliminary education assessment and the school roll forecast. The last school roll forecasts that were available at that point in time were published in November 2021.
Mm-hmm. We're
just wondering if Mr. Cotton can give an indication when the next school roll forecasts will be. Are they imminent?
They are imminent, yes. I've sent all the data off, so it's all gone to Leeds and is being kind of crunched by the people in Leeds, and we're anticipating getting it back fairly imminently, likely to be published in March, I would expect it. Or March at the earliest is the next potential publication date, or it may be April. But yeah, it is.
In addition to that, Mr. Cotton, that will be based on the Housing Land Audit 2021 and not the Housing Land Audit 2022. Is that correct?
That's 2022 based ones. 2021 didn't happen with COVID and various things going on. But
sort of based on draft audit.
Yeah, so based on 2022 school census data.
Oh, right. Okay.
With programming from the draft 2022 Housing Land Audit.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
It won't be from the. It'd be from the version of the audit from when I sent it off in October, which is quite the same as what the published audit will be, but they're very similar.
Okay. Is there anything that follows from that?
Okay. No, sir. I mean, what I was thinking was if we were talking about it being available in the next couple of weeks, it might have been worthwhile parties updating the position based on that. If we're talking about a couple of months, that doesn't seem appropriate, and we probably have to just make do with the best evidence that we have at the moment.
What would be helpful though, sir, if that's okay, obviously for if we could get for both primary school and West Calder High School, if we could get the Housing Land Audit assumptions that have gone in based on the draft 2022 audit that went in at that point for the numbers to be crunched, that would be very helpful, because what we can be able to see is what has changed and do they marry up. That would be helpful.
It will be the same as the ones you submitted, then you'll have some there.
Just be helpful to see that.
Yeah, I can confirm that.
So sorry, I'm not sure we're both. I'm not sure both parties are agreeing on exactly the point. Mr. Cotton is confirming that the figures are as submitted by the appellant on the 2022 audit. Is that what you're confirming?
Yeah. What? Assuming that Stuart and Alistair have read the 2022 audit, then I haven't checked their work. I'm happy to trust.
Right, but table.
I think I would just like to validate what we have done. Then, if you haven't checked it, so that's all I'm asking. Is that your Housing Land Audit based forecast assumption that you've submitted to Leeds is the same as what we have presented to you in document MH 0.08? So
yeah, I can check that.
Oh right, I thought you'd agreed to it already.
I haven't. I agreed it because I trust Alistair and Stuart to correctly read the audit.
I appreciate that, and this is just a double validation from both perspectives. If you understand.
Right. Okay. Good. So I think we've probably discussed 2B sufficiently. We've got a point at which it would be exceeded. 110 would be exceeded. And we've got a capacity where it would be exceeded.
I think possibly where we'd got to, sir, was the question at the end of 2C, which would be to what extent would a development producing, and I think that should probably be changed to a maximum of 40 pupils.
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent would a development producing a maximum of 40 pupils have a significant effect on the capacity of a school for 1,320?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with Mr. McLeod's point there, but I think the forecast is showing a significant overcapacity at West Calder High School, whether on an 1,100 or 1,320 capacity. It is a relevant matter to decide of, if you've got a bad situation, does it matter if you make it even worse with this development?
Mm-hmm.
Is the question Mr. McLeod is asking, and I think perhaps it comes back to the question 4D around that compliance with policy HOU2 and specifically the wording in HOU2 where it is point B in there, but any additional infrastructure required as a result of what is either committed or to be funded by the developer. So it's this question of if there isn't any additional infrastructure available, is the application in compliance with HOU2? I think is the question. Is is making it slightly worse? You know,
with respect, I don't think
HOU2 - capture that. I think is the question.
Okay, I'm happy to discuss that.
With respect, I don't think that is the question. I think the question is there additional infrastructure required? And that goes back to the point about if the school is going to be significantly over capacity without this development, the council is presumably managing that overcapacity issue within the school.
So I think the council.
Sorry, just a sec. So that was without the development, the school will be over capacity.
Without the development,
yes.
That will need to
be capacity problem. Westfield High School forecast over the next 5 years, and that's without the development going ahead. Effectively, the development adding 35 to 40 pupils on that's an additional 2 classes of secondary school pupils at 20 per class. The way we timetable and structure secondary schooling, so it's just taking a problem and making it 2 classes more of a problem. But
what's the council's solution?
They don't have one at the moment. When you're in a hole, stop digging, I think would be at least let's not make it worse.
It sounds like to use your analogy, it sounds like the council either should have stopped digging quite some time ago or should have found something to fill the hole. So is the answer that the council is going to expand just to 1320, or is it going to expand further, or is it taking the decision that 1320 is adequate and it can manage the overcapacity within a 1320 capacity building?
I think actually the position right is that 1320 is the maximum that can be delivered on the site because of the constraint of the site size and what can be built there. Anything beyond 1320, we have to come up with alternative solutions for, but are not yet identified.
Well, the alternative solution is the new Calderwood secondary, isn't it?
Is a potential solution, but that's a solution for which we don't have sufficient capital funding for.
Can I just ask what the council says the extent of the overcapacity without the development would be?
That's effectively the LDP scenario. So albeit slightly reduced by the fact that's come forward slower. But in the LDP scenario, we're up at 17, 18, 1900 pupils.
Yeah. Just to clarify, that LDP scenario includes Gaviside.
Yes, exactly. So, so if we take out Gaviside, it's less than that, but still more than 1300.
And have you got a figure for how much more than 1300?
I've not done those numbers. I've been anticipating once I get the new forecasts in, looking at those and seeing what that number might be.
But in the rough estimates that you've done, that you're going to provide us, that will provide us with figures up to, well, 2028, 29, won't it?
And but so just looking at the year at which we breached rather than trying to come up with a number for every year. To answer your questions of what year would we breach the capacities, been why I clicked follow up and to try and do a forecast. It wasn't a forecast.
Yes, but your methodology sounds relatively straightforward, and if I chose to, I could apply it to the further years, could I not?
I think we probably could, yes.
Right.
I haven't done so though, but in theory it could be in some point.
Okay.
Whatever the exact number is, I think our position is it's more than 1320, and until we have the money to build a new school, we don't have any other extension options available.
Sorry, I'm just going back to the beginning of this discussion when you told me the years that capacity would be exceeded, and I'm not sure if I have a note of it.
So it was 2024 for the 1100, and 2027
that's
for the 1320.
And that was with Gaviside, as I'd asked you to, yeah. And without Gaviside, as you say,
it's the same as Gaviside, smaller proportion of the overall secondary compared to the primary. It didn't huge difference.
Okay. So it's a question of you have an extension coming. There will be an overcapacity, whether or not the proposed development goes ahead. The proposed development would potentially make the situation worse until the extension is delivered. Thereafter, once the extension has been delivered in 2027, with the extension, there would be overcapacity then, with or without Gaviside, is what you're saying.
Yes. With or without this development. Gaviside being there makes the situation worse. This development being there makes the situation worse. But
if the Calderwood
will be over capacity even without this development and without Gaviside.
But if the Calderwood Secondary School is completed by 2027-28, that would provide a solution, would it not?
Well, if there were money to do that, then yes, but there is no funding for that school at present.
At present.
At present.
But if the school isn't funded, presumably the developments that are required to fund it in the Calderwood, in the West Calder High School catchment area wouldn't go ahead if they haven't agreed to fund the Calderwood Secondary School.
Fortunately, well, we need about 3,000 units worth to go ahead to generate enough money to build Calderwood Secondary School. So it's a question of, I think that comes to the point Mr. McLeod made about the reporter's comments, is that if I had the luxury of telling all the developers in the CDA that they couldn't go ahead until I had the money for the secondary school, it would make my life a lot easier. So have to let some development go ahead to generate the money for the secondary school. But there's an interim period where you have a problem where you haven't got enough money to build the school yet, but you have enough children to fill the existing school. And it's dealing with that interim period, and is the capacity issue that we're dealing with. And so that's the point at which adding in another 250 units into the same secondary school where I'm already dealing with that issue, saying the problem. So that's my position.
Yeah. In terms of the housing land audit comparison document MHO.08, there's a fall in the number of house completions of about 410 as compared with the 2020 housing land audit. I think I calculated that to Is that right?
In the first year period, so yes.
Yeah, certainly.
And an increase in the later years.
Then an increase in the later years, yeah. But without Gaviside, if Gaviside shouldn't go ahead, that increase, well, becomes very small indeed.
In fact, it is a cumulative decrease by our reckoning. I think we got it to, if you add up all of the figures in the row at the very bottom of that table, I think you get to minus 71 houses over that entire period.
And without Gaviside, it's actually, without Gaviside, it's minus, over the period 2021 through to 2028-29, there's a decrease in 500 homes.
Yeah. But of course, Gaviside would be at the Calderwood school, wouldn't it? That's the presumption on which.
The assumption is that Gaviside would be at West Calder High School, paying towards Calderwood School.
Calder School, okay.
With East Calder and Mid Calder children taken out to Calder High School to create space for Gaviside.
So that effectively doesn't show up on this chart, but there's just an assumption that Gaviside doesn't happen. Right.
Yes, so taking Gaviside out of this to Dean's, which is a secondary school which has spare capacity, as opposed to West Calder, which is a school which doesn't have spare capacity, is one of the measures we've taken in seeing these forecast numbers without a solution. One of the things we've done is to take, or attempt to take, Gaviside out of the West Calder numbers by transferring it to Dean's, which has 1,000 to 1,500, 100 to 150 spare capacity. So taking Gaviside out for an interim period.
Right.
So
if the catchment review goes ahead, there would be at least that fall in numbers of houses producing children.
Yeah, so that's about 80 to 90 children less of a problem than in the LDP forecast.
Mm-hmm. Which would account for all the children coming from proposed development.
In the initial phases, yes. But obviously, not all of the 2,500 Gaviside houses were anticipated to be built in the first 6 years of development.
Right.
I think it's only relatively small. I need to check bottom housing land audit for 5 years for Gaviside. But it's obviously a 15-year development rather than a 5-year development for a 2,500 house.
You've got 700. You've got 733 homes from 2024-25 to 28-29. 733 homes.
Sorry, what you're referring to, Mr. Salter?
So again, for Gaviside, so what was taken account in West Calder was 733 homes from Gaviside over the period 2024 to 2029.
There's then another 1,800 on top of that beyond the period we're currently forecasting.
Yes. 250 homes on the development, the appeal proposal is for that.
Mm-hmm. So what do you draw from that, Mr. Salter?
What I'm drawing from that, thinking about, is we really need to understand what the audited programming is that has been submitted off to Edge, because we don't have that programming that the council have submitted. Our draft housing land audit that we have used, sir, is based about a November-December time housing land audit that's been in liaison with Homes for Scotland. Can't conclude that the October information that Mr. Cotton has sent off is the same information. I just need to validate that on my side to understand where we're going, because there is, for example, in terms of Gaviside, etc., in 2026-27, the council stated they're going to build 235 affordable homes in that 1 year. Now, I'm not disputing that. I'm not debating that. but that's what they said they're going to do, and I just need to understand if that's still the same. In the information that Mr. Cotton thinks has been sent off to Edge Analytics or not, and we will find out within the next week. I understand, having liaised with Homes for Scotland as well, there is one site being disputed in the housing land order. Within the next week, there should be a final housing land order on the 2022. And I just need to confirm all these figures add up to the same thing. So,
then that site's not in either of the catchments here, it's in Bathgate, the one remaining disputed site. Wouldn't affect any of the ones we're talking about.
Well, I'm not sure.
I'll confirm that, but I think the numbers are similar to the ones Stuart's used, but we'll confirm that.
I'm aware, Mr. Cotton, that obviously when this goes ping-ponging between various parties, including your own affordable housing division, things change on a regular basis as the drafting of the audit is progressed. As far as I'm concerned, I've got the most up-to-date position, but if the council's forecasting based on an alternative position, just want to make sure, and the validity coming back to us, that we're singing from the same hymn sheet. Such.
It should be very similar, because by October, most of the disputed sites have been removed, so it should be a very similar version.
Thank you.
Right. Essentially, the appellant's position is there's a, as I understand it, there's a reduction in the number of houses being produced in the audit, provide space in the interim for the proposed development. Am I understanding that? Am I understanding it correctly? Or is that? Yeah.
It is, sir, and I think to go back to the question that you posed at the end of 2C, we are talking about a relatively small number of pupils, a maximum of 40, I think we're now agreed on, in the context of a very large school. And just one follow-up point in response to something Mr. Cotton said. He talked about, well, that means 2 classes. Well, it might mean 2 classes if all 40 children arrived at the one time. You have to bear in mind that the development's going to be phased over a period of 5 years. So that means a maximum of 8 pupils per year. And those pupils will flow through the school at different rates. So it's obviously, and I don't think Mr. Cotton's suggesting this, but it's not as simple as simply saying we'd need an extra 2 classrooms, for example, at that school, and we can't fit them in. The issue is that phasing becomes relevant, as would phasing of all of the other developments in the context of the inputs to West Calder High, which is why I think Mr. Salter's interested in seeing the most up-to-date figures that are available.
I would agree with this point. It isn't that simple. We wouldn't compare at once, but in total, it's likely to be 35 pupils spread over a period of time, number of year groups. Of course, the thing to remember is the children who are forecast to appear in the primary school do then attend the secondary school as well. So that is then taken into account in a different way in the forecasting. But it's not to say that those primary school children don't then appear later in the secondary school. So you do have 2 elements making up your secondary school forecasting. One is the direct secondary school child product, and one is the increased secondary school child product because of the transfer rate from primary schools. So as the primary school population goes up, your anticipated secondary school population goes up in that way, as well as in the direct way, which is why sometimes the issues with secondary schools can be somewhat postponed compared to primary schools, because the child product is lower at secondary schools, but the problems do sort of feed through later, and they can take longer. And it's more like turning a container ship around, trying to deal with secondary school load.
Yeah.
Because you've already, once you've got the kids in P1, you know they're going to be a problem in 7 years' time in S1 if you don't have capacity for.
Is there always a problem once they get to S1?
Good. I think we've probably taken that question as far as we can, unless anyone else wants to say anything on it. No. Okay. Question D and E were really roundup questions, and I don't know if anyone wants to add anything further on those. Specifically on the question raised by the council, would it be premature in view of the effect of the proposed development and planning capacity of West Galway High School? And would the proposed development be premature?
I think we probably covered the territory that we need to on that. We may reflect on that in light of the figures that we see from Mr. Cotton, but probably nothing else I would want to say at the moment on that, sir.
Fine.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything to add either.
Right. Okay. Grand. In terms of provision of the secondary school, of the new secondary school, yeah. I was asking to what extent is the permitting of the development for which permission has not yet been granted at sites listed in the table provided by the council, dependent on the agreement of a solution to ensure sufficient secondary education capacity. That's the table at 3.4. I think we kind of covered that, didn't we?
Yeah, I think the schools which are the sites which are contributing towards the secondary school solution, broadly speaking, mainly consented at this point or in the planning process. There wouldn't be huge numbers, but Raw Holding and Calderwood already have a consent. Gabby sites in the system, so most of the Mossend sites have a consent. So really, the only significant contributing site is the Bray site, which I think is 120 units, and it's in the 120 sites, HWC1. Cliff Bay, that's the only site contributing towards the secondary school which doesn't yet have a consent or an application. So, which of the sort of total 5,500 contributing units, it's a relatively small percentage of it.
So effectively, the only question that arises really is about the build out rates on those sites and the point at which the contributions come forward.
Exactly, yes.
Right. Okay. And you've predicted build out rates in the housing land audit, but you can't necessarily guarantee those.
We to be fair, we don't predict the build out rates. The developers predict the build out rates, and we just believe what we're told by the developers.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they always tell us everything accurate.
Well, to be fair, Mr. Costin, we've just discussed in your housing land audit, you're predicting 235 affordable homes to be built in 1 year on one site.
But the way we treat the council housing is we treat council housing within the council as another developer who we also believe everything they tell us as well. They're another honest developer.
Okay, but we know those houses aren't actually in this particular catchment, so we'll leave those out of the issue. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mr.
I don't know how far you're able to answer that. Sorry, Mr. Salton, you were
looking at table 3.43. I'm just trying to understand. You know, Raw Holding does have planning permission for one site. I'm just regarding the planning permission for the other parts. You know, there's a lot of sites without plan. I'm just trying to understand. Where?
Yeah, there's the Raw Holdings remainder south, I guess, is 100, isn't there? Which we've had a Callum, I think, who interested in that one. It doesn't have consent.
There's lots that don't have consent.
I mean, in your list, I mean, you've referenced planning permission, and so Row Holdings West, you've not mentioned the planning permission there, but it does say
they should have. They're both under construction at the moment, right, so there's an error there, not listing a planning permission.
No, that's fair enough. Sorry, that's my source of my confusion. Yeah.
Yeah. No, those 553 have implemented consents and are built, and we have children from some of those. Apologies.
So South,
that's got an application not granted. That's got Mike to grant.
Yeah, the 6, the 12, the 100, and the 30 don't have consents yet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And otherwise,
Mossend 60 doesn't, and Clutterbury doesn't. So it's probably 300 or so out of the 5,000 that don't have a consent.
Okay. Yeah.
There is a legitimate question as to whether they should get consents if this appeal is granted. I'll cross that bridge when it comes.
Right. Mr. Salter, have you got anything further on that, or you?
That clarified my point as well, sir.
Okay.
So
good. Yeah, I don't know how far you're able to answer the second part of that, and to what extent would development on sites served by the new secondary school be likely to impact on the capacity of West Calder High School in the interim. That's just showed in the projections essentially.
Cash sites, so that they're assumed to be coming forward. So
and you haven't included the new secondary school, so it is just essentially the prediction that you've given us.
So, it's just the timing of the children coming forward versus the money coming forward, and whether enough money has come forward to build a new school, or too many children come forward to fit in the existing school. That's the nature of the issue.
But you are you able to estimate on the basis, given that most of the sites have been consented, you've estimated their completion rates, are you not able to say at present when the new school will come forward?
I think at the moment we're anticipating it post 2030 would be the point we hit the 3,000 units. I need to go away and check the numbers, but the current assumption is to be around 2030, 2031 before we would have sufficient funding for it.
Can I ask just a supplement there? Scott, do those sites reflect not quite fully? Am I fully picking up? Do those sites reflect all the sites included in the previous table? So the table at 3.43,
no, because
and then you've got
the reporter at the LDP inquiry in his wisdom felt that only the sites in the CDA should contribute towards the secondary school. So that's the sites that are within the CDA.
Okay.
And actually, we could include one additional site in there because the Oak Bank appeal that was granted last week has contributions towards the secondary school. So there's that additional, but they're not included in the forecast equally. So that's additional children and additional money to add to the money for the school. So it's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But at the moment we can only take contributions from windfall sites or from sites within the CDA. So other sites that come forward within the allocated sites within the school catchment don't contribute unless they're in the core development area.
So as things stand, until 2030, really, when the new secondary school comes forward, whether or not this development is consented, you're effectively anticipating that capacity will be exceeded at West Calder in 2024 until the extension is completed, and then in 2027, so another 3 years after that.
Yes.
But this development would add to the difficulties, is what you're saying.
Yes, a relatively small
it would be an
percentage of
interesting
the
problem.
It would add is college wouldn't it's not digging in the whole position.
Okay. Right. Okay, there were just a couple of other things that came up.
I was just going to.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
If I could maybe just make an observation, perhaps ask whether the council agrees with it. Mr. Cotton's talked about the funding of school infrastructure within West Lothian. Maybe the first question I would ask is, would you agree that it's relatively unusual for education authorities in Scotland not to borrow money very early on, for example, now, to build schools in anticipation of money coming in from developments that are constructed over a longer period of time?
I think a lot of authorities do that, including West Lothian. So, I mean, we've obviously borrowed in reaching of £40 million, maybe £45 million to forward fund education in West Lothian, and so it's total quantum of borrowing that we've already got, but is dependent on development coming forward. So there isn't a position in West Lothian to take on additional borrowing risk.
So there's ultimately a question of borrowing risk, if you like, for the council, and that then has to be balanced by the council against its duties as education authority to provide a satisfactory education for children within the authority area.
Exactly, yeah.
And if you look at the situation with West Calder High, it is possible that it gets to a stage where the council decides that the capacity exceedance caused by existing children coming through the system is going to be too great, and that the council therefore decides that it should go and borrow the money earlier than it currently intends to build Calderwood High to relieve those capacity constraints.
If you're asking me to guess what political decisions might be made 5 years in the future, then it's so, you know, I can't guess what political decisions councillors might make 3 weeks in the future. 5 years in the future.
No,
scenario. I wouldn't miss it.
No, I suppose I'm not asking you to speculate on what politicians may ultimately do at a particular point in time. But I suppose the point I'm getting at is the council has an overarching education authority duty to provide satisfactory education for children in its authority area. And if it becomes clear that that is not possible, leave aside our appeal for the moment, but if the council was to decide that duty looks like it might be breached in the context of West Calder High, it will have to do something about it, if I could put it as neutrally as that.
Yeah, and that will have to be done through a combination of extensions, new capacity, placing request refusal, catchment review, and refusing additional development in areas where there's pressure. So effectively, this appeal is part of our strategy for dealing with that overcapacity pressure by recommending refusal. We're a very supportive authority of development in general, and I only object to developments where there isn't capacity. And so effectively, this appeal is part of the strategy of dealing with that overcapacity West Calder High School by recommending refusal of this development.
Another strategy which most other local authorities in Scotland adopt is to borrow money early on in the development programme to construct new education capacity, in the knowledge and expectation that funding will be, that borrowing will be repaid by developers as their developments are built out.
And you're suggesting that could be done to bring forward the new secondary school?
In essence, sir, yes.
Let's say that the position in the council at the moment is we've borrowed to build £60 million worth of primary and secondary schools at the moment, and we don't have any more capacity or appetite for borrowing risk in the education sector. So we're at our limit for what we're intending to do.
What are the risks?
The risk is that the economy tanks, that house builders walk away, and we're left paying £1.5 million a year interest on the loans we've taken out with no developer contributions coming in. And the councillors come to me and say, "You idiot, you said we were going to build 1,000 houses a year and we haven't done."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So goes bust and gets taken into special measures, and government appoint administrators to come and run it instead of councillors, at which point.
Well, I mean,
that's the risk. It's
yeah. Mr. Clyde, do you want to proceed that point any further, or I'll just leave you to look at your papers for a moment?
I think you probably have the general thrust of the points, which is, fundamentally, the evidence is showing that there is a problem at West Calder at the moment, regardless of this appeal. Something will have to be done about that at some point in the future. This development would contribute a maximum of 40 pupils, and that contribution has to be looked at in the context of the council's overarching education duty to provide satisfactory education for the existing children that are going to be going to school. So probably can't take it much further than that.
Grand. Okay, I did have a couple of other questions just in relation to, I think it was really just mostly in technical matters. The question 4A, I think, has been answered. Oh yes, no, I didn't fully understand, and it would be useful actually to have an explanation more broadly. The hearing statement, the appellant's hearing statement, at paragraphs 366 to 368, I really didn't understand. I'd kind of conceived the child per house ratio as a kind of an estimate of how many pupils a development would produce overall in terms of the amount of capacity that they would take up, rather than really particular pupils. So I wasn't really understanding what the idea that there would be fewer pupils than estimated because some would leave in senior years. I assumed that the child per house ratio would take into account pupils leaving in senior years. Unless I completely misunderstood what the appellant was saying, which is a possibility.
I think the point is that over a 5-year development period, the CHR will assume that the children will be, it takes into account a total number of children, pupils. They will be distributed across the years according to their age. Mm-hmm. And over a 5-year development period, it is fair to assume that some of the children, some of the pupils that have entered the school, will be leaving it before the development has actually completed. So right. It's to do with
would other children take their place, like from primary school?
Well, some will, yes, but it's all about managing a peak. So we'd expect the CHR to be it is a higher CHR for new direct entries. We're not. This is always the issue that we have to, really model these. But yes, some pupils will be entering from primary school, but the primary school pupils, they've got 7 years, 7 stages of which they'll be spread through. So if we're having X number, they'll be split between the years. So some will be going up from P7 to S1, and some will be leaving either at the end of S4, S5 or S6 from the secondary. So in terms of the secondary school pupils, not all the pupils are expected to be in school at the same time because the time it takes to develop the site.
Right. Because the child per house ratio doesn't represent, this is the number of children you would expect from any number of houses of this. It's a peak for a new development, is it?
You would apply it to the number of homes built in a year. So you can apply it to the development overall, but when it's getting developed and the pupils are entering school, it will be commensurate to the number of homes that have been completed. So you apply the CHR to the number of homes that have been completed each year to get an idea of how many will be there in each stage from the development. So some will leave. If you have pupils entering the school at S4 in your first year of development, then they will have left by the time you are building your finishing and fifth year.
Yes.
So I think it probably worth me just explaining the CHR, and that is the way we calculate it's an average of years 5 to 9 post development. So it's a kind of flattened peak. So the actual peak year would be higher than the CHR.
Okay.
But equally, once you get beyond 10 years post development, the averages will fall back below the child per house ratio. But it's also the point being that if you divide the sort of the 28 for primary by the 7 years, you've actually got about 4 per year. As you divide the 14 from secondary by the 6 years, you've got 2.5 per year. So the ones you'd expect to be coming on from primary behind the secondary ones will be more than the secondary who've left. So you don't get that drop off in numbers at secondary school until about 10 to 15 years post development, whereas the primary school drop off will be 5 to 10 years post development.
Okay, right. So
you've got the S4 children will have left 2 years later, but they'll have been replaced by P6 children, and there were more P6 children than there were S4 children to start with. So you don't get a drop immediately.
And other developments will also have gone through that same process. So it doesn't last in perpetuity. That's the point.
No,
so
exactly. It doesn't last in perpetuity. Yeah. So it's the situation resolves itself sooner in an area where there's already been some development. Whereas if it's an area where there's not been any development for a long while, the peak and the bulge will last longer. West Calder High School really isn't that worst case scenario because you've got development in Calderwood and Mossend has been ongoing for 7 or 8 years. So those children, those that are now 7, 8 years old, will be starting to have their drop off coming up in 3 or 4 years' time.
Okay.
Well, the new houses, it will take 10 to 15 years before we start to drop off to below the child house ratios.
Right. So essentially, you're agreeing with Mr. Bledowski, but you're saying the peak that it'll take a bit longer than the pound suggesting for the peak to drop away.
Yeah, it's 10 years post development before we start to see a child house ratio drop off below those average rates.
0.14 or whatever it will be. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could get with that, Splodowski.
Yes, the primary pupils will enter the school during the same period as well. It just depends really how you spread across the years. So how that works in practice is it's a little more tricky to predict.
So well, that's probably more for my information than anything else. But it's very helpful of you. Thank you. Right. I think we have probably. Well, I suppose it's a question of policy that, and I'm not sure. Did we fully cover that second question? Why education capacity constraints don't arise equally for the appeal proposal and allocated sites in the catchment of Parkett Primary School and West Calder High School? I mean, if we say that leaving aside this question of infrastructure, all the other criteria of policy HOU2 are met, aren't then, and let's say that the proposed development complies with all other elements of the plan, aren't the allocated sites and the proposed development simply in competition for the same infrastructure? Why should the allocated sites be privileged over the windfall sites? I know you did make a point about Gavyside in particular and Parkhead Primary School, Mr. Cotton, in response to that, but perhaps in relation to West Calder High School, why should the allocation sites be privileged?
I think to an extent they're possibly not as much as they could be, but I think HOU2 is the relevant policy, and obviously policy HOU2 doesn't apply to allocated sites, and it does apply to windfall sites. So it's the additional elements within policy HOU2 that need to be assessed for the windfall sites, because obviously allocated sites are not assessed against policy HOU2 requirements.
Okay.
It's that, and you know, the absolute requirement in HOU2 that any additional infrastructure required as a result of a development is either committed or to be funded by the developer. Additional requirement on a windfall site that does not allocated site. So additional policy assessment needs to be done for windfall sites.
Centrics there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think,
yeah, I mean the policy on core development areas, CDA1, and related planning obligations will require to meet the policy and legal tests set out in policy INF1. Is that not an equivalent requirement in respect to the core development areas, at least?
The point Mr. Wilde was making was that policy INF1 is not quite worded the same, but it allows that element of it's that funding is committed and infrastructure is being capable of being delivered, but the HOU2 is that it will be funded by the developer. So I think it's similar, but it's really it needs to be assessed that if the infrastructure if additional infrastructure is required as a result of a development, that additional infrastructure has to exist and has to be funded by the developer. Whereas in policy INF1, it's that really there's a duty on the council to try and create a solution, because those sites have been allocated. So that's our plan. So we've got to have those in the action program to work on those. But for windfall sites, we can't design potential infrastructure solutions for every single windfall site that might come forward. So I think two is saying is when a developer comes forward with a windfall site, but it needs to be seen, is there a infrastructure solution that can be delivered? Whereas for the CDAs and for the allocated sites, we plan and create within the plan-led system. We plan for those sites coming forward, and we plan infrastructure to deliver those. Where a windfall site comes forward, the assessment has got to be: is there even a possible solution? Because we've not been thinking about how we're going to fit in 250 more units here or 500 units there. So it's got to be saying, right, this is what's happening already. This site is now coming on top of that. Is there a solution? Can it be funded by the developer? And if there isn't a solution, or it can't be funded by the developer, then the requirements in HOU2 are not met. And that's the additional stage for a windfall site. But it's not there for an allocated site where we should already have an intervention plan.
So I'll just maybe point you to paragraph 3.42 of the council's hearing statement. I think that's a sort of that's a concise sort of summary of our position on the matter. I think just to add to that is a consideration of the cumulative impact of development. Yeah, it's over and above what we're already looking to deliver through allocated sites, can the proposed development provide mitigation over and above mitigation that's already being provided for, and the link between policy HU2 and INF1, if it's going to be funded by a developer, is what they are funding, is that capable of being delivered? And I mean, Mr. Collins has already set out our concerns and our position on both Parkhead Primary and Westcote High School, in both scenarios with and without Gaviside. There's still going to be a problem, and the appellant has put forward a proposal to mitigate that.
Mm-hmm.
I grant you on the Parkhead point that there's a slight difference there, given what we'd said before. Is our current position as of today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just turn to the appellant to respond to that.
Yeah, I think we covered this to a large extent in a document that we referred to earlier, which is the commentary on the Planning Authority response and section 4, where we went back into the LDP examination report and what the reporter that examined it thought policy INF1 was all about. And again, I'll maybe just give you a quote, which comes from paragraph 4.8 of our commentary on the Planning Authority's response.
Document MH 0.02.
Thank you. So, paragraph 48, ultimately, reporter Warren modified LDP policy INF1 to, and this is a quote, to provide additional flexibility over the proposed plan's approach to addressing infrastructure needs, whilst ensuring that, whilst possible, development proposals which accord with the plan's spatial approach are capable of being supported. Now, that comment and the reference to development proposals being in accord with the plan's spatial approach, that has to be seen in the context of the overall housing land requirement. So, and the minister's finding that the council had not allocated sufficient housing land in its LDP. So it's all very well to talk about having a plan-led approach. The minister and the examining reporter found that this plan was deficient, and as a result, put in place policy HOW2, modified policy INF1, and the purpose of both of those policies was to ensure a sufficient amount of housing was constructed to meet the plan's requirements, and also infrastructure did not get in the way as an impediment. Now, what the appellants in this case have said all along is they are perfectly happy to make appropriate payments to infrastructure that is required as a result of their development, and that remains their position. We do say that the evidence shows there is less need for that infrastructure than everybody thought there was at the very beginning of this appeal process. Our position remains that we are willing to pay an appropriate amount towards infrastructure should it be your finding that infrastructure is required. Okay. So I suppose in broad answer to your question about should the appeal site be treated differently from allocated sites, I say no, because they attempt to do the same thing. They attempt to deliver the right amount of housing that the ministers agreed was required in West Lothian.
Okay. I think I understand both sides' position on that, so I'll move on from that. I don't think you're necessarily going to agree. So, all right. I suppose that's a variant. I mean, this is really testing the point that Mr. McLeod made, whether as a matter of policy it's sufficient to to agree a proportionate contribution to the additional education capacity. Whatever situation might arise in the interim, presumably any situation that might arise in the interim would at least be a material consideration, whatever the policy, whatever the meaning of the policy is.
I think that's a fair way to put it, Sarah. The way I was going to put it is it would depend on the nature of the infrastructure constraint in question. If it was a fundamental infrastructure constraint in perpetuity, if you like, then that would be a significant issue. If it was a transitory issue, that might need to be looked at differently. And certainly in a scenario, and go back to the paragraph that Mr. Watson referred to from the council's hearing statement. This is paragraph 3.42. What the council says there, in a plan-led system, the council's negotiated with developers to support the delivery of education infrastructure in a way which ensures school capacity is delivered in advance of capacity pressures arising, but at a time which allows viability of development sites proceeding. West Lothian Council prides itself on being a planning authority that supports delivery of development through the plan-led system. It then goes on to talk about capacity of unplanned landfall sites. The difficulty is that the council hasn't properly recognised what it should be planning for. It's ignored the direction from the minister that it was not doing enough to deliver the right amount of housing and the minister's expectation that more housing should be delivered. And if the council was actually doing what it says it does in 3.42, it should be looking for solutions in scenarios like this, because this development isn't exactly the same category as allocated sites. It's trying to deliver the appropriate amount of housing to deliver the plan's overall requirements.
Restrain that on housing land supply.
Well, I mean, these things are connected, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. Just from an education point of view. That's what feels is needed.
Yeah, I think Mr. McLeod's point was posited on the basis that their arguments on housing land supply are correct, but assuming they are correct, do you not agree with this point?
Just want to, because we're in education positions where we're delivering sufficient of a housing land supply position that we feel is correct, rather than ignoring the education infrastructure that's needed to deliver what we feel is needed. That makes sense.
And we are collecting the monies towards the education infrastructure required for West Cola High School. And it just depends the speed and delivery of those sites, which we don't have control over as the council.
Yes, but again, taking the statement in 342 at face value, in essence, what you've done is you've put in place agreements which support delivery of education infrastructure in a way which ensures school capacity is delivered in advance of capacity pressures arising, but at a time which allows viability of development sites proceeding. So the council, in effect, is saying it is going to facilitate developments happening in a way which ensures that there won't be capacity problems.
Yes.
Based on the plan-led system and our expectation of sites forward, so adding in another 250 units at a time when we expected is what was the existence completely.
Bill needs to be higher within the catch itself. In any case, we can't. Again, we have no control over that. That's within the gift of housing developers.
Because obviously the LDP in place, but not all developers within the West Cola High School catchment would have to contribute towards the school. So we can't control how fast those ones come forward, but do generate pupils, but don't generate money.
I think that covers my point. Anyway, I'm not sure if there's anything. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. McLeod?
Well, thank you, sir.
Right, that's grand. Okay. We've kind of covered the next question, which is, I mean, this is really set out in policy about the interim solutions, and the council has a hierarchy of solutions, but Obviously, particularly in West Calder High School, there is you know, the overcapacity is happening, and you set out some of the solutions that the council is proposing to use. I don't know, is there anything you want to add to that, just specifically on this question at this stage?
I think we just say we do use temporary units wherever a viable and helpful solution. We've had two sets of temporary units, but they tend to be more practical in a primary school setting than a secondary school setting, on average, just because of the nature of specialist classroom requirements in secondary, but not impossible to use in a secondary setting. We do use them. We have taken developers' contributions towards them, and so it's not something we would rule out if it were proposed by the developer as part of a solution. But as I understand it, it's not something we're planning to proposing at this stage. But
it's kind of at the bottom of your
list. If we're proposing it, we'd consider it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if there's anything. We obviously that this point been discussed already. Was there anything you want to add to what you said, or as I said already, about in dealing with interim overcapacity, Mr. McLeod, or anyone on the appellant side?
Probably not at this stage, sir. No, I don't think so.
Okay, good. So my just last roundup question, is there anything else that we haven't discussed that we ought to have discussed in relation to the proposed developments impact on school capacity? No.
I hope not.
No. We've done it to death. I'm sorry. Right. Good. Okay. So I think well, obviously we'll need to get Mr. Cotton's figures and also the document he was going to provide about policy on working at planning capacity and general purpose spaces in primary schools. And after that, I would propose to allow parties an opportunity just to provide a written submission to sum up where that leaves us at the end of this hearing. I didn't give you an opportunity to provide written submissions on the housing land supply. I think it would probably make sense to give you an opportunity to do that too, if that's not been done to death. Just to give you an opportunity to provide written submissions on where the hearing on housing land supply leaves us. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, very happy to do that if that would be helpful to you, sir.
Right. Okay. And council content with that. So written submissions on both parts of the hearing. Okay.
I just realised the one other thing I should have mentioned was the update on the Gavi side catchment consultation. So there was a meeting yesterday where the commencement of that consultation was agreed, but it was the date that was anticipated. So it's not a change, just that date has happened. So that has been approved to commence consultation, but
so the consultation is going forward. Yeah,
consultation is going forward as expected. But the end date of the 20th of June is the same as previously discussed.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. Okay.
I think one more thing from our side, sir, is that we probably should update point 15 of our statement of agreed education matters around Parkhead Primary School. So there's an up-to-date position on the record that we've said orally today, so we can arrange that too.
That'll be clearer when we have Mr. Cotton's figures, I guess, and you can discuss on that basis. That would be very helpful if I could have an update of the agreed statement. If so I've said you could provide written submissions. When would be appropriate to provide them by? So at the end of next week be acceptable?
Well, is that from the council or the commentary from?
Oh, I suppose yes. No, that's right. Well, I think Mr. Cotton said he could provide his figures more or less by return, and
sweet.
But to provide those, yes. Well, that would be helpful if you could, and then the summing up at the end of next week. Is that? Oh, actually, I suppose the council should go first on providing a summing up, and the appellant should provide a response. So if we say the council provides its summing up by 27th, and then the appellant, the 31st? So that would be Friday the 27th, and then Tuesday the 31st. Would that be acceptable?
To
provide written submissions on the basis of the hearing. Yeah. Or is it?
Well, I think so. If Mr. Colton is planning to provide his information by Friday,
yeah,
which is the 20th. So we will need to review that and understand what we need to do to deal with that.
I suppose that's true. Yeah.
Yes. We've also got at the same time, so just reflecting back earlier, we're going to respond to the MPF4 response. This may not take very long to do, but we've also got the other parties' response to deal with as well.
Right.
So we need to write those.
And it may be that we need to have some kind of written submissions in respect of Mr. Cotton's figures.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, if the appellant has comments on those, we might want to see those and then make a final statement based on what their comments.
Well, should we, if Mr. Cotton provides his figures on Friday, we can take a further decision in the light of that.
Yes.
What to do next?
Yes.
I think that's maybe the most sensible way forward. But I will owe you an opportunity to provide summing up from this hearing and from the housing hearing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that takes us as far as we can today. So thanks very much for everyone. That's very helpful to me as always. So thank you everyone. Okay. Bye now.
Bye. Thanks.